If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 76, The Shadow That Couldn't Be Killed. Rhaegar's youthful voice carried an air of authority from everyone who heard it. A few brave natives got up from the ground and looked up at the huge dragon with a mix of fear and awe. They bent down to collect the charred remains left by the dragon fire. In a rare moment of satisfaction, Rhaegar showed mercy. He gestured to several other wildling leaders and asked, "Identify yourselves and explain the reason for your gathering." He didn't really care about their tribal names, but the curses they were talking about gave him pause. He'd seen what the shadow creature did to the Hawk tribe, so he figured these tribes had banded together because they were facing a common threat. He wanted to know more about the curse. "My name is Graham, this is Moriyama, and this is Trainjal." The pointy-headed savage leader was visibly shaken, giving an honest account like a submissive lamb. In total, 5 tribes of wildlings had gathered in the valley. Except for the leader of the Soldier Pine tribe, who met his end by dragon fire, and the other wildling leader who was dragged away, the remaining 3 were present. Rhaegar motioned for Cannibal to descend, his massive form kicking up a cloud of dust that momentarily blinded the wildlings. Seizing the chance, Rhaegar turned to one of the wildling leaders. "What exactly is this curse you're talking about?" he asked. The bearded savage named Trainjal spoke up, trembling with fear. "The curse comes from the shadows, a silent threat that takes men's lives without mercy. It can't be captured or killed. Our only option is to offer living sacrifices in an attempt to appease it." Indeed, the presence of a shadow creature seemed all too real. Rhaegar nodded in understanding and asked, "How widespread is this curse? Does it affect every tribe?" "There's only one curse that prowls the darkness of the swamps and pine forests in search of prey," Trainjal replied. "Have you seen firsthand the victim slain by this shadow?" Rhaegar inquired, his brow furrowed with concern. "Yes, lots of people have seen the cursed shadows rise and claim the lives of the living," Trainjal confirmed. "It seems to be a strange and dangerous creature," Rhaegar said quietly, realizing the seriousness of the situation. A malevolent that can move through shadows would be a serious threat anywhere. And now it was haunting Crack Claw Point. Who knows if it'll spread to the mainland? Rhaegar, accompanied by his dragon, felt he had to get involved. He waited for a while until they returned with the prisoners from the Hawk tribe. The soldiers' Pine tribe members were also brought forward and forced to kneel on the other side. After a moment of thought, Rhaegar spoke up, his voice cold. "Bring these traitors forward and lure out the shadow creature. Let's assess the threat it poses." The pitiless savages immediately obeyed and led the traitors forward, including the corpse of Xander, who had met his end. Riding on the dragon's back, Rhaegar watched as the savages tied the traitors to a tree and extinguished the surrounding campfires, plunging the area into darkness. At this point, they had to wait. The wildling leaders said that the shadow creature came almost every night, killing tribe members and scaring the community. After much discussion, they decided to unite, forming a coalition of 5 small tribes into one larger tribe. They raided neighboring tribes for resources and prisoners. They used these prisoners as sacrifices to feed the cursed shadows that plagued their tribes. Time passed slowly, the stillness of the night broken only by occasional murmurs and shifting shadows. By 2 in the morning, a collective unease had taken hold in the air as the wildlings knelt nervously, unsure of what was going to happen to them. Rhaegar was lying on Cannibal's broad back, his senses dulled by weariness and anticipation. Then, suddenly, a piercing scream shattered the silence, jolting everyone to attention. Rhaegar suddenly sat up, his eyes snapping to the source of the disturbance. It wasn't coming from where the prisoners were being held, but from near the Soldier Pine tribe. The terrified scream of a female wildling cut through the night, causing the crowd to part and revealing the scene of the curse's attack. Rhaegar jumped to his feet and looked around. There he saw a male wildling sprawled on the ground, caught in writhing black tendrils that emerged from the shadows below. Beside him lay another unfortunate soul, lifeless and bleeding from every orifice. "Clear the way!" Rhaegar barked, scattering the surrounding savages and urging the cannibal forward. "Dracarys!" The dragon, taken aback by the shadows, paused for a moment. But at its master's command, it unleashed dragon fire at the encroaching shadows. Boom! The green fire lit up the night, burning a path through the shadows and leaving a scorched crater in its wake. But to Rhaegar's surprise, the shadow creature was unharmed. "It's not burned?" Rhaegar asked himself aloud. Before he could make sense of the situation, another scream cut through the air. This time, it was from the wildlings of the Hawk tribe. Rhaegar quickly turned his attention to see the tentacles of darkness seize several female wildlings and their children. The tendrils were incredibly efficient, plunging into their bodies and snuffing out their lives. Rhaegar was astonished as the shadows on the ground expanded with each life taken, and the tentacles grew longer and more menacing. Dracarys. Rhaegar gave the order, and Cannibal let loose another blast of fire. This time, the shadow creature didn't stand a chance. It retreated instantly into the darkness as the dragon fire engulfed it. The creature writhed and convulsed in agony, unable to withstand the flames. It tried to get closer to Rhaegar, but Cannibal's dragon fire repelled it. At last, it let out a piercing hiss and retreated into the nearby shadows. What kind of creature is that? Rhaegar was amazed by the creature's resistance to the dragon fire. The dragon fire was a force to be reckoned with, capable of melting even stone, yet this monstrous creature had withstood it, evading capture in the darkness. Rhaegar was intrigued by the shadow creature's mysterious nature. It was unlike anything he had encountered before. Meanwhile, the sight of the dragon battling the shadow creature filled the onlookers with a mixture of awe and terror. Rhaegar was getting tired of their constant pleas for divine intervention. He signaled Cannibal to silence them with a resounding roar. "I'm not a god," he said firmly, cutting through the noise. "I'm a Targaryen. So silence." Amid the crowd, Skyla grabbed Tormund's arm, her eyes gleaming with admiration and wonder as she looked up at Rhaegar. She spoke with great enthusiasm, saying, "You command the dragon, you are a dragon lord." Her declaration inspired the other savages to join in, chanting the title Dragon Lord in unison. Rhaegar looked at Skyla with a raised eyebrow, acknowledging her proclamation. Even though he wasn't the legendary Dragon Lord himself, the title the savages gave him had a certain power and respect. Rhaegar looked down at the tribesmen, who were submissive and fearful. He began to form a plan. He was determined to get revenge on Falcon's tribe, but he realized that one wildling leader wouldn't be enough. As he considered his options, he decided against a slaughter and instead opted for another approach. The shadow creature was a serious threat, and if he wanted to get rid of it, he'd need the help of these very wildlings. With a firm voice, Rhaegar addressed the crowd. "The curse that plagues Crack Clawpoint is putting your very existence at risk. It's forcing you into migration and turmoil. I'm Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, the king's eldest son, and I ride the strongest wild dragon that can burn everything with dragon fire. Submit to me and I will protect you from the curse, and together we can kill that shadow." Chapter 77, Conquering the Peninsula. Though Rhaegar's voice was youthful and his stature small, the presence of Cannibal at his side loomed large, casting a formidable shadow over the assembled wildlings. At his command, the wildlings bowed in awe before the imposing figure of the dragon. Taking control of the situation, Rhaegar continued, his tone firm, "Now that you've pledged your allegiance to me, you'll obey my every command without hesitation or risk facing the wrath of dragon fire." The wildling leaders, at first filled with fervor, submitted, understanding that resistance would only lead to their destruction. For the wildlings were not stupid, they knew that the curse meant death for them, while the dragon fire offered a chance at salvation. In the presence of the mighty dragon, the previously disparate and rebellious wildlings were drawn to the prospect of a stronger leader. Watching the newfound admiration in the savages' eyes, Rhaegar's own emotions stirred, a sense of responsibility settling on his shoulders. After a moment of reflection, he issued his first command. "The shadow creature threatens all tribes besides yours. Before it becomes too powerful, you will unite under my banner and take control of the peninsula." This was Rhaegar's improvised strategy: gather the wildlings, draw out the shadow creature, and destroy it with dragon fire. A chorus of excited cheers erupted from the wildlings at the promise of conquering the peninsula and subjugating rival tribes. Among this tribe of fierce warriors, who engage in perpetual combat, nothing rivals the intensity of their passion, whether in battle or in love. The next day, Rhaegar gathered the wildling leaders and entrusted them with the responsibility of leading their respective tribes. Having lost their leader, the soldier Pine tribe chose a successor and united under the name Crab Claw, signifying their allegiance to Rhaegar as their supreme leader. The valley proved to be an ideal location for their settlement, offering abundant resources and natural defenses. Rhaegar ordered the women and children to remain in the valley, guarded by 100 skilled warriors drawn from the 5 tribes of the wildlings. With the addition of the elderly, infirm, and non-combatants, their numbers swelled to over 3,000. After weeding out those unfit for battle, Rhaegar was left with a force of about 1,000 warriors, a formidable contingent for his purposes. Their mission was clear: to fan out across the swamps and pine forests, seeking out and subduing the tribes of savages throughout the peninsula. At the mere sight of his dragon circling twice overhead, the savages willingly submitted, their silent acquiescence speaking volumes. In just 5 days, Rhaegar's dragon traversed the eastern reaches of Crack Claw Point, quickly bringing more than a dozen small tribes under his control and swelling his ranks to tens of thousands. On the edge of a poisonous swamp, Rhaegar reclined in a rudimentary shelter made of animal skins. Sitting amidst the animal skins, Rhaegar inquired, "How many have we assimilated today?" "Prince, we've assimilated over 2,000 in total, with only about 800 of them fit for combat," Skyla, now dressed in linen, reported, presenting the latest tally of recruits. The strategy of the peninsular savages was remarkably simple. Rhaegar was largely inactive, except for the occasional dragon ride to intimidate rebellious tribes, relying mainly on the manpower provided by the crab claws. Skyla continued, "You have traversed the eastern peninsula on dragonback and integrated the wild tribes. However, there are noble castles in the western region, so we've refrained from rushing in." "No matter, the nobles of the peninsula are sworn to the Iron Throne," Rhaegar replied somewhat nonchalantly. The conquest of the peninsula proved to be less exciting than expected, more like a game of make-believe. The ignorant savages fell to their knees at the mere sight of the dragon, sparing Rhaegar any significant effort. At that moment, the tent flaps parted to reveal a tall figure. "Prince, the leader of the White Crow tribe refused to surrender, so I've brought you his head." Trainjal, one of the first crab claws to swear fealty, knelt before Rhaegar and offered a bloodied head. They met regularly with Rhaegar, and though he refused the title of Dragon Lord, they gladly addressed him as Prince. Frowning in disapproval, Rhaegar commanded, "Dispose of the remains and spare me of such display." Were it not for the shadow creature, he would have gladly distanced himself from these brutal displays. Each of them seemed as dense as a block of stone. How much longer would he have to endure such barbarism? He nodded and left, announcing, "The White Crow tribe has been subjugated, and the eastern peninsula is tribe-free. We will rest tonight and move on the western region at dawn." "Agreed, Prince," Trainjal affirmed, preparing to take his leave. Skyla interjected with concern, "We're running low on supplies, and with so many mouths to feed, the valley's resources won't last long. How long can we sustain ourselves?" Rhaegar inquired, straightening his posture. 3 days at the most," Skyla replied curtly. "Alas, with tens of thousands to feed every day, how did you manage before?" Rhaegar lamented, never having dealt with logistics. "Tormund and I struggled to feed ourselves for half a year under Uncle Falcon's care," Skyla recounted. "Let's hurry to the western peninsula and deal with the shadow creature quickly," Rhaegar instructed, with a worried expression. "Was there any sign of the creature?" "No, it looks like he hid, knowing it was being chased," Skyla replied, expressing her frustration. 2 days later, on a desolate mountain pass, a procession of wildlings hurried westward. Above them soared a colossal black dragon, its vast wings casting a shadow over the land below. With the eastern reaches of the peninsula secured, Rhaegar led the wildlings on a great migration. But he exercised prudence, choosing not to take everyone. The elderly, the infirm, children, women, and half of the warriors remained in the east, living off the hunt. The remaining contingent, consisting of over 24 crab claw leaders and more than 2,300 men, accompanied Rhaegar westward, carrying provisions for 3 days. Though seemingly modest for a force renowned across the continent, their numbers made for a formidable army on this desolate peninsula. Along the way, they encountered several small noble clans, entrenched in the valleys for generations, with noble titles but mired in poverty. As Cannibal's wings passed overhead, these lesser nobles emerged from their dwellings and pledged allegiance to the prince. But their loyalty proved weak when Rhaegar demanded supplies for the wildlings. They refused even when he promised double repayment, and only relented when they saw the power of the dragon. "Attack! Kill the dogs of House Brune! Damn you crabs, slaughter them all!" Hovering above, Rhaegar watched a chaotic melee unfold in an open field below. "Cannibal, let's descend and survey the scene," he commanded, tapping the dragon's spine as they descended. Below, a motley group of iron-clad soldiers clashed, their clothing lacking proper armor, most wearing rough linen robes. Their weapons, aged and worn, betrayed the appearance of a formal army. Rhaegar watched the skirmish, noting the banners on both sides, marsh marigolds and a deadwood adorned with skeletons hanging on both sides of the clearing. Chapter 78, The Loyalty of House Crab. As the confrontation between the opposing forces increased, the intensity of the battle reached its peak. Knights under their respective banners led the charge, their war cries echoing across the field. Upon seeing the two banners, Rhaegar immediately recognized the insignia of the largest noble families on the peninsula, House Brune of the Dire Den and House Crab of the Whispers. Though often considered half-wild, these two families maintained a semblance of family honor, especially House Crab, which boasted a history of prominent members, including former members of the King's Guard and the Small Council. Rhaegar couldn't help but wonder about their motives for conflict, given their impoverished state. Why would these families fight? He mused, puzzled by their seemingly incongruous actions. Preferring not to act impulsively, Rhaegar remained atop the dragon, watching the battle unfold. In times of war, animosity knows no bounds and cannot be quelled by mere words. As the melee continued, Rhaegar decided to take the initiative and intervene, attempting to stop the bloodshed and negotiate with the defeated and wounded members of both families. Despite his efforts, the battle raged on, with combatants on both sides fighting desperately, their screams filling the air. After half an hour of relentless fighting, fatigue began to take its toll on the combatants. At that moment, Rhaegar's own forces arrived from the rear, encircling the battlefield at his command. Asserting his authority, Rhaegar sought to direct and organize the chaotic battle, recognizing the opportunity to learn from the experience despite his youth. The battle below came to an end, prompting Rhaegar to intervene. He patted the cannibal's spine gently, signaling him to descend through the clouds. With a roar, Cannibal let out a long whistle as his colossal form emerged from the clouds, casting a shadow over the battlefield like a dark storm descending upon a city. The soldiers caught in the melee were thrown into disarray by the sudden appearance of the dragon, and chaos erupted in their ranks without any command from their leaders. Hovering in the sky, Cannibal unleashed a display of green dragon flames without waiting for orders from either side's commanders. Dragons! There are no dragons on this peninsula. Run! What kind of monster is that? The battlefield was thrown into utter chaos the moment the dragon appeared. Terrified soldiers abandoned their armor and fled, only to be blocked by the wildlings on the outskirts of the battle. Led by the crab claws, the wildling army closed in, screaming and provoking. Seizing the opportunity, Rhaegar led Cannibal into the clearing, drawing the attention of both commanders. When they saw the figure atop the dragon, its silver-gold hair catching the light, the hearts of both sides skipped a beat. A dragon with a rider was far more manageable than a wild dragon unleashed upon men without restraint. From the back of his dragon, Rhaegar surveyed the battlefield below and proclaimed in a resounding voice, "I am Rhaegar Targaryen, eldest son of King Viseis. Where are the knights loyal to the Iron Throne?" His words reverberated across the field, causing both commanders and their retinues to rush forward and kneel before him, heads bowed, offering their allegiance. "Greetings, my lord. The Brune House and the Crab House send you their most sincere greetings," they chanted in unison. Rhaegar surveyed the commanders and their aides, all clad in iron armor and robes of office, and asked, "The noble families of the peninsula have always maintained their independence. Why did you engage in this private war?" "Prince, it is the Brunes who have been oppressing us and invading our lands." The Knight of House Crab replied indignantly. "Nonsense! It is you, the Crabs, who have plundered our merchant ships before, yet you refuse to acknowledge it." The Brune commander shot back, his expression filled with resentment. Frowning at the heated exchange, Rhaegar tried to determine the cause of the conflict. But as soon as he asked the question, the two sides began a heated argument, drawing their swords and advancing on each other. As he watched the scene unfold, Rhaegar could not help but feel a sense of frustration. The rough nature of the half-wild families on the peninsula left no room for diplomacy, they were quick to resort to violence to settle their disputes, with no time for reconciliation. Rhaegar commanded the cannibal to let out a deafening roar, instantly silencing the battlefield. With a stern expression, Rhaegar addressed them with clear dissatisfaction, "Summon your lords and pay homage to the king's eldest son. Or bring forth whoever holds authority in their place." "Yes, prince." The two sides dared not delay, their mutual hatred and anger momentarily set aside as they ordered their adjutants to summon their respective lords. Meanwhile, Rhaegar ordered the remaining troops to gather the bodies of the fallen soldiers. He then ordered the wildling army to form a defensive perimeter, consolidate their position, and send scouts to the eastern reaches of the peninsula for any remaining wildling tribes. It was near noon when a few swift horses carrying the lords of the two castles reached the open field of the battlefield, where the lingering scent of blood still hung in the air. Their first sight was the imposing figure of Cannibal, sprawled on the ground like a small mountain. 7 above. "A Targaryen prince has graced Crack Claw Point with his presence," exclaimed the head of the crab family, a tall, elderly man with half-white hair and a stout frame, as he gazed upon the pitch-black dragon. The peninsula was so desolate that encounters with outsiders were rare. For many years, the sight of a member of the royal family commanding a dragon was almost unheard of. Ignoring the advice of his guards, the Lord of Whispers, Sam Crabbe, quickly dismounted his horse and raced to the dragon. When he saw the drowsy Rhaegar on the dragon's back, his eyes widened in disbelief. To tame such a colossal dragon at such a young age! He marveled. Kneeling on one knee with his sword raised in respect, he called out in a strong voice, "I, Sam Crabbe, Lord of the Whispers, pay homage to the prince." Rhaegar looked down at the old man and remarked, "Lord Sam, it is not customary to offer one's sword in greeting to a prince." "I am aware of that," Sam replied, breathing heavily. "But when faced with such noble blood and the sight of such a dragon, I can only humbly offer my allegiance. The Crabbe House wishes to pledge our allegiance and become your bannerman. My ancestor, Sir Clarence Crabbe, known as Clarence the Short, was a knight of the King's Guard. And my uncle, Sir Clement Crabbe, was a knight of the King's Guard during the reign of King Jaehaerys I Targaryen." Rhaegar listened intently as Sam recounted his family's history, weaving a tale that stretched back to the days of House Targaryen. But Rhaegar remained perplexed by the fervor of Sam's loyalty. "I'm only a prince, not heir to the Iron Throne." Rhaegar was even more confused. Sam's smile held as he continued, "Today, House Crabbe has long since distanced itself from House Targaryen. Whether you ascend the Iron Throne is of little consequence to us. All we seek is to pledge our allegiance to you, noble prince, and to see the banner of the Marsh Marigold once again embraced by the glory of the crown." Rhaegar hesitated, his mind swirling with conflicting thoughts. While House Crabbe's allegiance could be of great help, it would also draw unwanted attention. With a furrowed brow, Rhaegar carefully considered his answer. "Lord Sam, I appreciate your unwavering loyalty, but as a prince without claim to the Iron Throne, I cannot rightfully accept a lord's allegiance." Chapter 79, The Shadowlands. "Prince?" Sam began, but was cut off by a younger man at his side. "Old Sam, the prince does not want your old bones, do not embarrass him any further," the man interjected. Dressed in black, he was the Lord of Dyerden, and he too knelt before Rhaegar and offered his greetings. "Wells Brune pays his respects to the prince and offers his sincerest blessings." Anger flashed across Sam's face and he turned his head away from Wells with a contemptuous snort. "Rise, both of you," Rhaegar commanded, motioning for them to stand. As the appointed leaders gathered, Rhaegar wasted no time with formalities. "I have no interest in the squabbles of the nobles of the peninsula. I'm here for only one reason. Have any of you heard of or encountered an unnatural shadow creature?" Wells replied bluntly, "Not really, Prince." Sam hesitated before speaking. "Prince, I have heard rumors of such a creature." "Please, tell me more," Rhaegar urged, his curiosity piqued by the unexpected lead. Sam's expression turned serious as he recounted, "About half a moon ago, a merchant ship was shipwrecked in a storm in the narrow sea. It washed ashore on one of the beaches of our peninsula. Our soldiers from the Whisper were sent to investigate. When they boarded the ship, they found it deserted, with no cargo or survivors. Disappointed, they began to disembark, only to be ambushed by a creature lurking in the shadows. It killed 3 men before vanishing without a trace." Wells opened his mouth to interrupt. "Wrong, that freighter was a ship trading with the Dyerden, shipwrecked on the narrow sea and plundered by you. In your words, it became an empty ship with no money and no people." "Enough," Rhaegar interjected sharply, silencing the young lord's attempt to intervene. "I didn't ask for your opinion. Be quiet." Stunned by the rebuke, Wells hesitated for a moment before lowering his head in submission, his words stifled. Turning his attention back to Sam, Rhaegar urged him to continue. Sam recounted the incident with the cargo ship and the subsequent conflict between their families, emphasizing the accusations made against them by the Brune house. Rhaegar rubbed his temples, frustrated at the lack of useful information despite his inquiries. He shifted the conversation to the origins of the shadow creature. "Where did the cargo ship come from and what route did it take?" he asked, directing his question at Wells. Wells replied in a subdued tone, "The freighter departed from Karth, passing through Slave Bay, the Stepstones Islands, and the Free Trade City-States. Occasionally it would stop at Crabbe's Bay on its way back, trading goods with Gulltown and the Dire Denmark." "Karth?" Rhaegar mused, remembering the world map he had studied in the Red Keep. "Karth lies at the Jade Gates, which connect the Summer Sea to the fabled Jade Sea. The city lies southeast of Alhazar and the Red Waste, and southwest of the Bone Mountains. Karth's location also makes it the gateway between the lands of West Eros, the Free Cities, and Slavers Bay, and the more eastern lands of Asai, the Shadowlands, and Yeti. As the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, Rhaegar's suspicions grew. The Shadowlands, shadow creatures. He pondered the connection between Karth and the Shadowlands, his mind racing with possibilities. Sam offered a reminder, Prince, the Shadowlands is a realm shrouded in darkness, filled with sirens and blood witches, a realm of fear and chaos. Perhaps the Shadowlands is too far from West Eros to be detected, he added. Rhaegar paused for a moment, considering Sam's words. Lord Sam, in the western part of the peninsula, a shadow creature terrorizes the wildlings and thrives on taking lives. I've come here on my dragon to destroy it. House Crab stands ready to serve you, Prince, Sam declared solemnly, his commitment unwavering. Rhaegar acknowledged Sam's loyalty with a nod before turning his gaze to Wells. Wells scowled at Sam and the nearby wildlings. Prince, you should not pay attention to old Sam's story. He's just trying to distract you from the fact that the freighter was plundered and to deceive you. So Lord Wells believes the shadow creature I saw is a fabrication. Rhaegar's eyes narrowed slightly. I dare not suggest that, but considering the prince's youth, it might be wise to stay away from savages. They're nothing more than ignorant beasts, Wells replied weakly. Rhaegar's expression hardened. Enough, Lord Wells. The shadow beast is real and it consumes life to strengthen itself. It's time for the people of the peninsula to put aside their prejudices and unite to defeat it. With all due respect, I have never encountered this supposed shadow creature, and I refuse to work with savages and enemies, Wells countered, his tone defiant. Rhaegar waved his hand dismissively. Then you may leave. When Wells tried to interject, Rhaegar cut him off. Go, Lord Wells. Return to your castle and refrain from provoking conflict until the shadow creature is defeated, he commanded firmly. Seething with rage, Wells glared at Rhaegar before the cannibal's low growl filled the air, signaling his displeasure. As dragon saliva splattered over Wells, the Dire Den commander quickly stepped in and led him away from the scene. With the forces of the Dire Den in retreat, Rhaegar turned his attention back to the task at hand and waited for everyone to leave. Sam glanced up at the sky and extended an invitation to Rhaegar. Prince, would you care to join us at the Whispers? The Crab House would be honored to host you for a sumptuous dinner. Rhaegar raised an eyebrow at the offer. It was a tempting offer, especially considering his recent focus on the shadow creature and the fatigue that accompanied it. If there is any surplus food in the Whispers, I would like to distribute it to the warriors of the Free Folk. Upon my return to King's Landing, I will see to it that you are repaid twice, Rhaegar added, his tone sincere. Sam hesitated, weighing the request against the resources available. Despite his reservations, the opportunity to forge a bond with the prince was too valuable to pass up. After a moment's consideration, Sam nodded and conceded, certainly, the Whispers will provide food for the savages for 3 days. Any additional assistance will strain our resources, but we will try to accommodate it. With over 2,000 men in his army, Rhaegar knew the burden of his request. Still, he was grateful for Sam's willingness to help. Your generosity is greatly appreciated, my lord, Rhaegar acknowledged, relieved to have solved the immediate food shortage. As they prepared to leave for the Whispers Castle, Rhaegar found his opinion of Sam Crabbe greatly enhanced, appreciating the Lord's willingness to extend hospitality despite the difficulties of it. Chapter 80, Dire Den Castle. Chapter 80, Dire Den Castle. The next morning, Rhaegar emerged from the embrace of a soft goose-down bed, his brow furrowed with the fragmented memories of dreams he had had the night before. Prince, Lord Sam awaits you in the breakfast room, a maid's voice called from beyond the ornate stone bedroom. I am aware of that, Rhaegar replied, rising to his feet with a trace of fatigue clinging to him. Throughout the night, his sleep had been interrupted by haunting visions. In one, Rhaenyra's tear-streaked face loomed before him, her grip on his hand tight as she voiced her concerns. In another, his father's normally placid face was distorted with rage as he ordered severe punishments, heads impaled on spikes as reminders of his wrath. Rest assured, I'll be back soon, Rhaegar murmured to himself, determined to finish his mission and return to Dragonstone Island once the threat of the shadow creature had been defeated. Rhaegar pushed open the door to find a young girl in a delicate silk gauze dress waiting for him. Lady Rhaenyra, there was no need for you to come to inform me personally, Rhaegar remarked, acknowledging her presence with a nod. Rhaenyra offered a small smile. Father assigned me that duty, Prince. It's no trouble at all. You are too kind, Rhaegar replied, returning her smile with one of his own. Indeed, Sam Crabbe knew a thing or two about hospitality. The dinner he had arranged for Rhaegar the night before had been a pleasant experience, with good food and mild company. They descended the stairs together to find Sam already seated at the table in the waiting room. Prince, Sam greeted warmly as Rhaegar approached. Rhaegar returned the greeting and gestured for Sam to sit down, taking his own seat across from him. As they began to partake of the simple but exquisite meal, Rhaegar addressed the subject of the previous evening. Lord Sam, what do you think of my proposal? He asked. Sam paused thoughtfully before answering. The shadow creature poses a grave threat to the peninsula, and the crab house stands ready to fight alongside you. He went on to outline the complicated dynamics of the region. In the eastern part of the peninsula, controlled by the Brune and crab houses, the presence of wildlings is scarce. If we are to confront the shadow creature and rally the scattered wildlings, cooperation between our two families is essential. Rhaegar, well versed in history and politics, understood the importance of gaining the support of the local nobles. While the encounter with the Brune house had been less than favorable, the prospect of working with the crabs seemed promising. Sam's willingness to offer assistance was evident, and Rhaegar gratefully accepted. Breakfast ended, but Rhaegar remained unsure of how to confront the shadow creature. Sam, however, had a suggestion. The ship where the shadow creature first appeared is still stranded on the beach. I didn't dare approach it before, but now that you are riding a dragon, I can try to investigate it, Sam suggested. After a moment's thought, Rhaegar agreed, proceed as you think best, Lord Sam. With the plan in motion, 100 fully equipped soldiers were gathered from the Whispers, led by Sam himself. Meanwhile, Rhaegar ascended Cannibal the dragon to oversee the operation from above. The wildling army remained on standby, stationed in the wilderness for the time being. As they traveled toward the beach, located along the coast, came into view after an hour's journey. Upon reaching the beach, they spotted the stranded junk ship in the distance, the site of the shadow creature's first appearance. Cannibal, land, Rhaegar ordered, motioning for Cannibal to descend onto the beach. The abandoned ship, battered by the elements, lay in disrepair, its hull weathered and its mast partially broken. Sam dispatched 10 soldiers to search the ship, paired off for safety, ready to alert the others at the slightest sign of danger. To their relief, the search revealed no threats. The ship is empty, the soldiers reported upon their return. Rhaegar and Sam exchanged looks of disappointment. Return to the Whispers and see if there are any developments among the wildlings, Rhaegar ordered, causing Cannibal to take flight again. A simple search had proved futile, a more strategic approach would be needed to draw out the shadow creature. At Rhaegar's command, the Cannibal gracefully soared to the Whispers. Moments after landing, Rhaegar noticed a messenger on a white horse engaged in a heated argument with the guards at the walled gate. Confused, Rhaegar approached, his curiosity piqued by the unfolding scene. Where do you come from as a messenger? Rhaegar inquired, his brow furrowed in confusion. Seeing Rhaegar's arrival atop the dragon, the messenger quickly disengaged from the guards and addressed him, Prince, I come from the Dire Den. Please read this letter. Dire Denmark. House Brune. Rhaegar murmured, his expression troubled. What of Wells? I informed him of the temporary truce on the peninsula. Lord Wells died. The messenger declared, his face heavy with grief as he knelt before Rhaegar. What? Rhaegar's voice cracked with disbelief, his mind struggling to comprehend the sudden turn of events. The messenger continued, recounting the grim details. After bidding you farewell yesterday, Lord Wells returned to the castle and secluded himself. No one dared approach him. When the maid entered his chamber this morning, she found him lifeless in his bed. There were no signs of external injury, but the maester determined that blunt force trauma had penetrated his mouth, nose, and ears, causing fatal brain damage. Rhaegar's mind raced as he processed the information, a shiver running down his spine at the implications. The shadow creature. He murmured, a sense of foreboding settling over him. Previously, the shadow creature had only targeted the savage tribes, but its brazen attack on a noble lord marked a dangerous escalation. Shaking off his unease, Rhaegar decided, from now on, we must all stay close to the Cannibal for safety. Determined to address the situation, Rhaegar accepted the messenger's letter and quickly scanned its contents. The letter explained Wells' death, had an agreement for a truce with the Whispers, and an invitation to a banquet at the Dire Den signed by Bart Brune, Wells' brother. After reading the letter, Rhaegar instructed the messenger, wait here for Lord Sam. I will go on ahead. With a heavy heart and a sense of urgency, Rhaegar spurred the Cannibal on, heading straight for Dire Den, which lay across from the Whispers. The two castles were built on the south and north shores of the eastern part of Crack Claw Point, separated by a large area of wilderness. Fortunately, the Cannibal is very fast, a half-hour is enough for a round trip. As the sea breeze whipped around him, Rhaegar's mind raced with the weight of impending danger, spurred on by the threat lurking in the center of Crack Claw Point. Rhaegar and his dragon soon arrived at the Dire Den, a foreboding castle perched on a rugged mountaintop. The Cannibal circled the fortress before descending gracefully, its menacing roar echoing through the air as emerald flames erupted from its maw, signaling the arrival of a Targaryen prince. The soldiers stationed on the city walls, stunned by the imposing sight, wavered in their resolve. Looking down at the closed gates of Dire Den Castle, Rhaegar awaited the lord. As expected, the sturdy wooden doors swung open to reveal a procession of finely dressed men and women emerging from within. In the forefront was a tall, slender youth reminiscent of the late Lord Wells. Close behind were a woman with a prominent red eye and a weathered, armored middle-aged man. As the Cannibal landed in the courtyard, the gathering of nobles found themselves face to face with both man and dragon, their astonishment palpable as they gazed upon the figure astride the dragon's back. Recognizing Rhaegar as a representative of House Targaryen, the young man stepped forward and bowed respectfully. "Your Grace, Bard of House Brune, at your service." Rhaegar looked at him with a puzzled expression. "Your brother has died." Chapter 81, The Truth. "Yes, he was killed in an attack last night," Bart said with a heavy heart before extending an invitation. "Prince, please let us host a welcome feast in your honor." "Your brother's departure makes such festivities unnecessary," Rhaegar said with a gentle shake of his head. Bart paused for a moment, unsure of what to say. The middle-aged man accompanying him interjected, "Wells was a fool, and his passing doesn't bother us. A Targaryen prince deserves far more than what he did. In that case, maybe we could just take a quick tour of your place," Rhaegar suggested with a faint smile as he dismounted the dragon. With the Cannibal stationed outside, Rhaegar remained unfazed by any potential hostility from the assembled group. His status and the fact that he was there with the dragon meant that he was treated with respect, no doubt about it. Once he'd dismounted from the dragon's back, Rhaegar was led into the castle by his hosts. The atmosphere was noticeably different from what it had been when Wells was there, no trace of his former arrogance. Indeed, fools often met an early end, leaving behind survivors who, while not necessarily wise, had a certain level of prudence. Once they got inside the fortress, Rhaegar acted like a curious kid, asking Bart to show him around. Dire Den Castle looked impressive from the outside, but the inside was pretty simple, just a 3-story building with strong stone walls. After his brief exploration, Rhaegar retired to a waiting room to rest. As he sipped the juice the maid brought him, Rhaegar noticed Bart standing nearby and asked, "Sire, it seems you have something on your mind." "Yes, Prince," Bart immediately took the lead in the conversation. He dropped to one knee, received a sword from his servant, and presented it with reverence, bowing his head as he spoke. "I've heard that House Crab has pledged allegiance to you. I, Bart Brune, representing House Brune, offer you our allegiance as well and await your response." Rhaegar tasted the grape juice, feigning curiosity as he remarked, "Sire, your brother's death has already made you Lord of Dire Den. To pledge allegiance on behalf of the family required the authority of the Lord, a position Bart had not yet officially assumed. "Not yet, but I've sent a raven to King's Landing with the request and expect an answer soon," Bart replied, his forehead beading with cold sweat. Setting down his glass, Rhaegar shook his head gently. "I'm afraid, Sire, I cannot accept a lord's allegiance without proper authority, nor can you swear it in your brother's stead." "Prince?" Bart's disappointment was obvious. The older man with him stepped in and scolded, "Enough, Bart. The honor of House Brune has already been tarnished by your brother's actions." Bart bowed his head obediently and refrained from speaking further. Rhaegar's attention shifted to the middle-aged man, noting that the emblem on his chest differed from House Brune's. It was a brown bear's claw on a white background, bordered by 2 brown lines. Unable to recall the origin of the crest, Rhaegar inquired, "Sire, what house do you represent?" Sorrel Brune left Bart alone and said, "Sorrel Brune. I'm from the Brune branch of knightly families, and our territory is in Brown Hollow." Rhaegar thought for a moment. "I see, the descendants of the Brune brothers, the famous conquerors of Crack Claw Point." After the meeting, Rhaegar leaned back in his seat and asked, "Sire, could you tell me what the real reason for your invitation is?" He didn't think a simple letter of condolence was the only reason for summoning a prince. He tightened his smile and spoke solemnly, "This time, it's Bart who's extending the invitation to you, seeking your help in saving House Brune." Interesting, Rhaegar's interest was piqued. Sorrel continued, "Dire Den is plagued by a curse, born of Well's folly and greed. The ship was from Karth, but it had no business with House Brune. It was returning from Bravos when it fell victim to a storm and washed ashore near Dire Den, where it was found and rescued by local fishermen. Wells, as the Lord, questioned the captain and crew when he heard about the valuable cargo on board. Driven by greed, Wells orchestrated a night raid on the ship, resulting in the slaughter of the crew and mercenaries, save for one enigmatic figure, a black-robed man in a red mask. This man identified himself as a Shadowbinder from the Shadowlands." Rhaegar's expression changed. "A Shadowbinder? The mysterious figures of folklore." The leader of the raid dismissed it as mere legend and beheaded the Shadowbinder, Sorrel confirmed, his tone serious. "Did the Shadowbinder's death end the curse?" Rhaegar pressed eagerly, his curiosity burning. Sorrel hesitated before answering, "Not quite. After the Shadowbinder died, his headless body turned into a shadowy spectre. It lurked in the darkness, following the soldiers back to Dire Den, where it continued its deadly rampage, claiming several lives that night. For a time, the shadow seemed to disappear, leading Wells to believe that the curse had been lifted. But it reappeared and claimed his life." Sorrel's account of the incident lacked any sense of sadness for the fallen lord. Instead, it was filled with a strong sense of hatred. "So Wells lied to me. He knew about the shadow monster from the beginning," Rhaegar grimaced. Bart fell to his knees and pleaded, "He didn't want to hide it. Intercepting and killing a passing merchant ship is a crime, and he didn't dare." "Since he knew it was a crime, he should not have taken the risk," Rhaegar interrupted sharply. Apparently, these two brothers were both fools. One was bold enough to face the consequences, while the other was too stubborn to admit when they were wrong. Rhaegar's anger flared. "The curse was wrought by the crimes of Dire Den and has stained all of Crack Claw Point. That alone warrants Wells' head a dozen times over. And you should be thinking about how to atone for those sins. Should we report this to the king?" A timid woman spoke. Rhaegar's gaze, lacking warmth, shifted to Bart and Sorrel. Bart quickly interjected, "She is my brother's wife. Do you propose to report this matter?" Rhaegar asked, his tone measured. After days of non-stop travel, Rhaegar was feeling the effects of his journey. But he just couldn't bring himself to ask his father for help. He figured he could handle this on his own now that he'd mastered the cannibal. It was his adventure with the dragon. "Of course not," Sorrel, the oldest and most thoughtful of them, answered first. Bart quickly followed up, pointing out that House Brune's honor would remain tarnished until the curse was lifted. Rhaegar shrugged and let out a sigh. "All right, you're wearing me out." Chapter 82, Notes of the Forest Witch. The Brune house finally revealed its secrets, and the truth came out. "You've had dealings with the Shadowbinders in your family. Any thoughts on how to resolve this?" Rhaegar studied them closely. Bart swallowed nervously before answering, "Not exactly, but the head of the Shadowbinder who was killed is still kept in the castle for safekeeping." The headless body of the Shadowbinder had undergone a strange transformation. Wells realized the significance of the head, so he had his soldiers retrieve it. "Take me to see it," Rhaegar said firmly. "As you wish, Prince," Bart agreed, leading Rhaegar to the attic on the sunlit side of the castle. The attic was pretty desolate and covered in dust, except for a circle of tallow candles casting light on a single object in the center, a pale, white head. "This is our defense against the curse. By illuminating the head with candles, we prevent the curse from taking hold of it," Bart explained. "And the shadow creature tried to take the skull?" Rhaegar asked, his brow furrowed in curiosity as he surveyed the eerie sight. "Not exactly. The creature seems to lack intelligence. We take this measure only as a precaution," Bart explained respectfully. Before Rhaegar could fully absorb the disturbing sight before him, the creaking of stairs echoed from below. Sorrel hurried up to the attic, his expression urgent as he delivered the news. "Prince, there's a large group of wildlings surrounding the castle. They claim allegiance to you." Rhaegar's surprise was obvious. "Yes, I've put together a group of free folk and they pledged their allegiance to me, seeking refuge from the shadow monsters that roam the lands." Grateful for Sorrel's initiative, Rhaegar turned to descend the stairs and instructed, "Keep an eye on the head, it may come in handy." Bart nodded earnestly, "Yes, Prince." With a quick glance at Bart, Sorrel followed Rhaegar down the stairs. As Rhaegar left the castle, he heard the wildlings howling. Roar! Cannibal, sensing his approach, lowered his body and offered his back for Rhaegar to mount. Head for the walls, Rhaegar said briefly, settling on the cannibal's sturdy spine. To Sorrel's astonishment, the black dragon lurched forward, spreading its massive wings to take flight. Outside the castle walls, a huge crowd of wildlings was waiting. Some looked scared, while others had the scars of recent battles on them. As Cannibal circled overhead, his presence caused the wildlings to scatter and fall to their knees in awe. With a loud thud, Cannibal landed on the ground, his green eyes looking calm and uninterested. Perched on the dragon's back, Rhaegar surveyed the scene below and asked, "What brings you here? Why have you gathered?" Amidst the crowd of wildlings, a towering figure emerged, blood seeping from a gash in his shoulder. "Prince, we were searching for other tribes when we were ambushed by the creature. Many of us were wounded," Rhaenyra explained, his voice strained with pain. Rhaegar's eyes widened in surprise. "How many casualties and how large has the shadow monster grown?" he asked. Rhaenyra grimaced. "Nearly 100 of our warriors and over 300 of the local tribe. The shadow creature covers a large area. If it weren't for the bonfire that inadvertently thwarted its advance, our escape would have been perilous." Rhaegar's concern deepened. "Can we track the shadow creature?" he asked eagerly. "I'm afraid not," Rhaenyra replied with a heavy heart. "The creature is avoiding capture, lurking in the shadows beyond our reach." Rhaegar furrowed his brow as he considered their next move. He realized that their enemy was hard to find. "We need to act fast," he said aloud, thinking through different ways to deal with it. Meanwhile, Sorrel, stationed on the city wall, overheard their conversation and voiced his concern. "Prince, if left unchecked, that cursed creature will continue to threaten the peninsula," he warned. Acknowledging the gravity of the situation, Rhaegar nodded thoughtfully. "Prepare provisions for our guests," he instructed, "and send word to Lord Sam. We will need his counsel to formulate a plan." As he spoke, Rhaegar could feel the weight of his responsibility bearing down on him. Although he was young, he knew that it was important to get advice from someone who knew what they were doing when things were unclear. At noon, Sam Crabbe rushed toward Dire Den with a group of soldiers, relieved to see Cannibal's towering silhouette in the distance. Entering the fortress with a sense of urgency, he was greeted by Bart, who had been expecting his arrival. Sam was pretty upset when he heard about Well's death and the prince's unexpected visit. In the waiting room, Sam's meeting with Bart and Sorrel was pretty tense, given that they had a lot of history and a lot of bad blood between them. Upon discovering Well's treachery in killing the Shadowbinder and stealing his farmland, Sam's anger only intensified. Feeling deeply wronged by Well's actions, Sam seethed with resentment and humiliation. Unable to remain a silent observer, Rhaegar intervened. When Bart took control of the Dire Den, he offered a profuse apology on Wells's behalf, along with double compensation for the confiscated farmland and 1,000 gold dragons. Although he was still unhappy, Sam reluctantly accepted House Brune's compensation, mindful of the looming threat of the shadow creature and the prince's authority. After all, Wells is already dead, and it is not a good decision to fight House Brune for no reason. As the meeting got more and more heated, Rhaegar and his advisors gathered around the council table to come up with a plan to deal with the shadow creature. Sorrel's idea was pretty straightforward: "We've got about 90% of the wildlings on the peninsula gathered up. We could use some of them as bait in the wilderness." Rhaenyra's response was venomous: "Black-hearted bastard, why don't you use your old man as bait?" Sorrel's retort was equally aggressive: "Foolish savage, allowing you to enter the castle is already a generous gesture, don't provoke me into severing your head." Rhaenyra's taunt escalated the tension. "Let's see if I can't take your head off first and use it as a wine jug." Rhaegar was getting pretty annoyed, so he bellowed, slammed his fist down on the table, and shot them a stern glare to stop their argument. As the room fell silent, Rhaegar was pretty annoyed at the way his advisors were arguing with each other. "What's with all the bickering?" he asked, his frustration evident in his tone. The two opponents snorted in disdain, each turning their heads defiantly, unwilling to back down. Sam, who had been watching the exchange from the sidelines, stood up to speak to the prince after the argument had died down. "Prince, the curse seems to be magic-related. Perhaps we could use similar magic to fight it." "Magic is dangerous. Who among us has the knowledge of such arts? Aside from Dragonfire, I can't think of anything else," Rhaegar asked. With a confident grin, Sam stepped forward. "Prince, you must have heard of my ancestor, Clarence Crabbe. He was a legendary hero who unified Crack Claw Point and left behind extraordinary stories. For example, do you know the origin of Whisper's Castle, which belongs to the Crab House? Rhaegar's face clouded with confusion. He wasn't well versed in such history. He looked to Bart for more information. Understanding the hint, Bart elaborated, the legend speaks of Clarence's great power and his wife, rumored to be a forest witch. It's said that for every person Clarence killed, a severed head was brought home. The forest witch would then kiss these skulls, bringing them back to life, and they became Clarence's silent advisors. Since they didn't have any vocal cords, they could only communicate in whispers, which is why the castle is called that. Rhaegar's eyes sparkled with intrigue as he turned to Sam. Lord Sam, are you familiar with such magical practices? The idea of resurrected heads was indeed rare and intriguing. Sam cleared his throat, his tone subdued. We cannot replicate the feats of our ancestors. We can't. Rhaegar's disappointment was palpable. What was the point of mentioning it if it couldn't be replicated? Sam added, I don't know anything about magic, but the forest witch's notes on it are still in the whispers. Those notes were written in Valyrian, a language that's no longer spoken in our family. However, since you're of ancient Valyrian descent, perhaps you could decipher them. Would you be willing to share these priceless magical texts? Rhaegar's youthful demeanor changed to one of seriousness. It's not like there's a shortage of people who know about magic. There are occult studies at the Citadel, but they've never really proven useful. As he explained, Sam got up from his seat and started to move around the room. Kneeling before Rhaegar, he spoke with reverence, yet I remain hopeful, Prince, that I can assist you in restoring peace to the peninsula and achieving unrivaled greatness. Chapter 83, Marsh Marigolds. Rhaegar looked at Sam Crabbe with a thoughtful expression, as if he was trying to decide what to say. The man's unwavering loyalty was both admirable and a bit of a challenge. But as he kept thinking about it, the forest witch's arcane knowledge started to look pretty appealing. If these notes held the key to defeating the shadow creature, they might also open a path for him to delve into the mysteries of magic. Who wouldn't want to have such mystical powers at their disposal? Taking a deep breath, Rhaegar said, Lord Sam, I think the contents of these notes could be really useful. I'll give your request some thought. Yes, Prince. Sam's astonishment was evident in his eyes as he replied with equal gravity, May the glory of heroes shine upon you. I sense that you will be the new hero of Crack Claw Point. I hope so. Rhaegar's smile was faint as he murmured, Time is of the essence. We must move quickly. First, we must retrieve the forest witch's notes. Lord Sam, since our time is short, I will ride Cannibal to the Whisper's Castle. Can you tell me to the location of the notes? Without hesitation, Sam replied, they're stored in the basement of the castle. Ask Rhaenyra for help. She'll show you where they are. Very well. I will leave immediately. With his mind on defeating the shadow creature, Rhaegar told Tranjal to deal with the wildlings outside the city walls. Then, he rode Cannibal towards the Whispers on the southern coast. The Cannibal reached its destination in just 10 minutes, landing gracefully at the castle gates. The guards stepped forward to salute, recognizing the dragon rider. As Sam's children emerged from the castle to greet him, Rhaegar exchanged brief pleasantries before seeking out the young girl, Rhaenyra. Though initially confused by his request, Rhaenyra, ever the resilient daughter of the Crack Claw Point, wasted no time in leading Rhaegar down to the castle's basement. Descending through 2 levels, one well lit and the other shrouded in darkness, they reached their destination. With the flicker of an oil lamp, Rhaenyra illuminated the dim surroundings, revealing an eerie room filled with various objects and boxes. In one corner sat a desk decorated with an array of skulls. This is it, Prince, Rhaenyra murmured softly, making her way to the desk and lighting a large candle. Though taken aback by the strange sight, Rhaegar steeled himself and approached the table, noticing a wooden box resting on it. Rhaenyra pulled a key from one of the skulls and unlocked the box, revealing a thin, yellowed book inside. With great care, she handed it to Rhaegar and cradled it in his hand. As Rhaegar accepted the book, he felt the smooth texture of parchment beneath his fingertips and realized it was no ordinary paper. Let's step outside, Prince, Rhaenyra suggested, noting his discomfort in the dimly lit cellar. Agreed. Let's go outside, Rhaegar replied. As they walked, Rhaegar studied the forest witch's notes, his brow furrowing with each line he deciphered. The writing was indeed Valyrian, but it was a far cry from the traditional High Valyrian of the Targaryen family. It was a mixture of various dialects, interspersed with both common and obscure scripts, creating a tangled web of words. Fortunately, Rhaegar's knowledge of Valyrian allowed him to make sense of the jumbled text, though it would have been dizzying for anyone else trying to read it. Nature magic. Flower of life. Dead man's murmur. By the time he came out of the cellar, Rhaegar had read the whole book, which was only a few pages long. The book was pretty slim, with just 3 spells and some basic info on nature magic. Of the 3 spells, Rhaegar could only fully understand one, the Forest Witch's Dead Man's Murmur, a spell that can resurrect severed heads. The other 2 spells were harder to get. One spell involved animal shape-shifting, which required an innate ability that most humans don't have. The third spell focused on connecting with the essence of nature, which meant having a deep understanding of the natural world. Mastering these spells would require not only a deep understanding, but also an innate talent for natural magic, which is a challenge even for someone like Rhaegar. Luckily, Dead Man's Murmur is pretty straightforward. It doesn't require any special talent, just certain materials, Rhaegar said thoughtfully. The magic was based on a unique substance, the Flower of Life. The Flower of Life has a powerful vitality that preserves the head from decay, allowing the spell to awaken the memories of the deceased. But there was one key difference: memory wasn't the same as consciousness. The skull was able to speak, but it didn't have any real intelligence. It was just a puppet, a hollow echo of the life it once held. This realization left Rhaegar with a sour taste in his mouth. He recoiled from the idea of manipulating corpses for personal gain, finding it morally repugnant. What a despicable form of magic, Rhaegar muttered, his brow furrowed in disgust. This wasn't the kind of magic he was looking for. He was drawn to the awe-inspiring magic flames or great swords, the magic of heroes and warriors. No wonder the Citadel shuns such practices, they only breed corruption, he mused, his disappointment evident as he handed the book back to Rhaenyra. Did you not like the contents? Rhaenyra inquired, her tone soft. Valuable knowledge, perhaps, but not the kind I seek, Rhaegar replied with a shake of his head. Still, he formulated a plan. The Shadowbinder's head stayed put in the dire den. If he could revive it, there might be a chance to gain insight into how to fight the shadow creature. Turning to Rhaenyra, Rhaegar asked, do you know anything about the Flower of Life? He had memorized the incantation for Dead Man's Murmur, but the spell required a crucial component, the Flower of Life. Rhaenyra's expression turned curious as she gestured to the family banner that adorned the wall of the waiting room. Prince, our emblem, the marsh marigold, is also known as the Flower of Life. Rhaegar glanced back, taking in the intricately wrought golden flower, a stark contrast to its origins in the murky swamp. I had assumed it was just a common marsh orchid, Rhaegar admitted in surprise. Rhaenyra explained with a smile, while marsh marigolds may resemble orchids, they have a distinct coloration and thrive in different environments. The marsh marigold, said to be hardy and teeming with vitality, is hailed as the Flower of Life. Undeterred, Rhaegar pressed on. Where might one find it? Rhaenyra shook her head. Marsh marigolds are extremely rare, thought to have disappeared over a century ago, probably driven to extinction. Rhaegar said, if I go on an expedition on the Dragon's Back through the swamps of the peninsula, is there any chance of finding one? Rhaenyra gave a realistic assessment. Given that half of the peninsula is covered by swamps and barely inhabited, the chances of finding a Flower of Life in the middle of the swamps are pretty slim. That's fine, Rhaegar replied confidently, sounding sure of himself and his abilities. As long as it's still out there, there's a chance. Then he turned to a more pressing matter. Regarding the notes, please keep it safe, the Forest Witch was clearly good at natural magic. Chapter 84, The Shadows Approach. With a farewell to Rhaenyra, Rhaegar mounted the dragon and left the Whispers. According to legend, the last sighting of a marsh marigold in the heart of the swamp, nestled in the center of Cracked Claw Point, the largest swamp on the peninsula. The swamp was shrouded in a perpetual miasma and plagued year-round by poisonous insects, so it had remained untouched by human presence for many years. Despite the swamp's reputation, Rhaegar was determined to use his dragon to find the marsh marigold. As they neared the edge of the swamp, Rhaegar looked to the sky. The sun was still high, there was still time to find the flower and return to Dire Den before nightfall. Roar! Hovering over the marsh, its vast expanse stretching endlessly below the edge of the sky, the cannibal let out a low growl, expressing its reluctance to move forward. Rhaegar tenderly stroked the dragon's scales and wondered aloud, what is it, Cannibal? The dragon shook its head and flapped its wings, signaling its discomfort. Do you think there might be something dangerous lurking in the swamp? Rhaegar ventured a guess. Roar! The cannibal's tail lifted and tapped Rhaegar lightly on the shoulder. Am I in danger here? Rhaegar's voice trailed off as he was frozen by the dragon's warning. In response, the dragon flew over the swamp and directed a stream of dragon fire at a patch of mud. Boom! The explosion erupted in mid-air, dragon fire igniting gases and sending up a noxious blast that churned the muck below. Rhaegar watched the show with a frown. Is that miasma? He remembered the maester's lectures on the subject. The swamp air is pretty toxic, full of noxious gases, ready to burn if exposed to fire. The dragon's flame had accidentally set off the dangerous miasma. Are you worried that I might breathe in the poisonous fumes? Rhaegar thought for a moment, then placed a reassuring hand on the dragon's spine. The cannibal, who was more clever than he let on, knew what he was doing, his green eyes saying it all. Have you crossed this swamp before? Rhaegar asked, trying to figure out what the dragon was up to. I'm looking for a particular hardy flower. Do you know where it is? Rhaegar showed him the crabhouse crest, adorned with the distinctive marsh marigold. The cannibal paused for a moment, then took the emblem in its mouth and spread its wings to lead Rhaegar on a new path, moving quickly and purposefully. In a matter of moments, Rhaegar and the cannibal came to another corner of the swamp. This area was a mix of marsh and pine forest, with the marshes encroaching on the forest and creating a pretty unpleasant landscape. Here, the miasma was much weaker than in the heart of the swamp, which gave them a bit of a break from the noxious fumes. Cannibal glanced back at Rhaegar and let out a low growl, as if to convey a message. Rhaegar understood the dragon's silent warning and reached for a handkerchief from his bracelet, moisten it with water, and cover his mouth and nose. The dragon snorted in apparent discontent and motioned for Rhaegar to dismount. However, he seemed to be completely unaware of the gesture. Cannibal lowered himself, prompting Rhaegar to reluctantly comply. The dragon moved over the swamp, its huge body brushing against the occasional pine trees, snapping them like twigs as it moved. Its head swiveled back and forth, scanning the landscape as if searching for something. Rhaegar guessed that Cannibal must have encountered marsh marigolds before, probably during its time away from Crack Claw Point, when it had been nursing its wounds. During that time, Rhaegar didn't know where the dragon was, but it seemed like Cannibal had looked for the flower of life before. As the dragon kept looking, not bothered by the bad smell, Rhaegar stayed on its back, resting a bit as it went up into the air. He was waiting for Cannibal to find the marsh marigold. With his mature instincts and keen senses, Cannibal would surely find the marsh marigold. But in the silent gloom of the swamp, Rhaegar couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that he was being watched. Cannibal, I have a bad feeling about this. Stay alert, he ordered, his senses heightened since the ambush at Dragonstone. Every rustle of leaves and sway of grass caught his attention. The cannibal roared in response, acknowledging the warning, and its wing shifted subtly to reflect its heightened vigilance. As they flew on, a sudden movement caught Rhaegar's eye. Without hesitation, he commanded, Dracarys. At the same time, the cannibal unleashed a stream of flame that engulfed the shadow tentacle that lunged at them like a snake. With a sizzling sound, the tentacle disintegrated into viscous droplets upon contact with the dragon fire, falling harmlessly to the ground. Rhaegar quickly identified the source and turned the cannibal's fire on a decrepit pine tree, reducing it to charred remains in moments. But the elusive shadow tentacles remained hidden, vanishing without a trace. As Rhaegar and the cannibal considered their next move, shadow tentacles suddenly appeared from all directions, encircling them like a tightening noose. Cannibal reacted quickly by flapping his powerful wings and soaring upward, avoiding the attack. From above, jets of green dragon fire cascaded down, engulfing the shadows below, reducing them to ashes in an instant. Surveying the aftermath with a grave expression, Rhaegar remained vigilant, expecting more attacks from the shadow creatures. But to his surprise, none came. With a firm nod, Rhaegar refocused on their main goal. Cannibal, let's move on. Let's focus on finding the marsh marigold first. Cannibal agreed and turned in a new direction, acknowledging the lack of immediate danger. There were lots of swamps in Crack Claw Point, and each one could hide treasures beyond belief. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the landscape, Cannibal led Rhaegar through several small swamps until they reached one near a rushing stream. A macabre scene unfolded before them. A carpet of white bones covered the swamp, the remains of wild beasts drawn to the water's edge by the poisonous miasma. With a loud thud, Cannibal landed in the middle of the eerie scene, his huge weight crushing a few pine trees under his huge talons. Amid the devastation, Rhaegar caught sight of smoothing a marsh marigold blooming on a patch of green stone. Cannibal, you've outdone yourself, Rhaegar murmured, awed by his dragon's keen senses. Cannibal shot a disdainful look at him, as if to say, "That's easy, ignorant boy." Ignoring this, Rhaegar descended from Cannibal's back and traversed the gnarled roots and sinking pine trunks to reach the precious flower. Navigating over the sunken pine logs and through the muddy terrain, Rhaegar approached the patch of green stone where the marsh marigold thrived. With gentle hands, he cradled the flower's rhizome. Rare specimen detected, containing traces of magical essence. Initiating analysis. The system's prompt echoed in Rhaegar's mind, letting him know that it had successfully detected the flower's unique properties. With bated breath, Rhaegar studied the flower, his excitement palpable. Who knew such a humble place held an opportunity for exploration? He quickly accessed his system interface and examined the newfound discovery. Flower of Life. Exploration progress, 0.5%. Chapter 85, Life Essence. The initial exploration progress is low, so it seems the quality of the marsh marigold flower isn't bad, Rhaegar mused, assessing the situation. With his experience in exploration, he eagerly reached out to pluck the flower, anticipating its potential. But before his fingers could grasp it, a sinister shadow tentacle lunged out of the darkness, catching him off guard. In the blink of an eye, Cannibal's tail intercepted the attack, severing the tentacle in one swift motion. Reacting quickly, Rhaegar grabbed the marsh marigold and retreated hastily. Once again, the shadow tentacles closed in on them, prompting Cannibal to unleash a torrent of dragon fire in defense. But in the midst of the chaos, a new threat emerged. A headless figure emerged from the shadows, wielding a steel spike and pierced Cannibal's tail with alarming precision. The dragon's blood sizzled as it struck the searing metal, filling the air with a pungent scent. The headless figure stuffed the steel spike stained with dragon's blood into its stomach and turned around without moving. As Rhaegar locked eyes with the enigmatic figure, a shiver ran down his spine, sensing an unnerving connection between them. Splatter! In the next moment, Cannibal recoiled in pain from the blow to his tail and quickly swatted the headless figure away with a flick of his tail. As the shadow silhouette dispersed, the tentacles lurking in the darkness vanished one by one, along with the steel spike hidden in the headless apparition's stomach. Rhaegar quickened his pace toward Cannibal, clambering onto the dragon's back with urgency, the marsh marigold clutched tightly in his pocket. "Let's go, Cannibal," he urged, a feeling of unease gnawing at him. The encounter with the headless figure had left him unsettled, defying the typical behavior of the shadow creature. They were usually mindless creatures, driven by instinct alone. But this one felt different, almost human. Rhaegar's mind raced as he considered the implications, his unease growing with each passing moment. Sensing his rider's apprehension, Cannibal wasted no time, flapping its powerful wings to rise into the sky, putting distance between them and the disturbing sight below. As they ascended, Rhaegar's thoughts raced, pondering the possibility that the shadow monster had evolved, gained intelligence beyond its primal instincts. Late at night, Rhaegar guided Cannibal in a slow hover over Dire Den, taking his time before descending. "This exploration is complete, please retrieve the lost treasure," he heard the familiar beep of the system. Rhaegar eagerly checked the survey report. Flower of Life. Progress of exploration, 100%. "It's finally done, just in time," Rhaegar sighed with relief, quietly celebrating the completion of his exploration. Instead of heading straight back to Dire Den Castle after leaving the swamp forest, he took a detour to the Whispers. There, he briefed Rhaenyra on the situation, advising her to increase patrols and fortify defenses against possible attacks by shadow creatures. At the same time, he mobilized a portion of the wildling army stationed nearby and instructed them to assemble at Dire Den. After a day of activity, they finally returned to Dire Den. "Now let's see what treasures the marsh marigold has yielded," Rhaegar said, cupping the golden flower in his arms as he activated the exploration reward. A shimmering purple light emerged from the exploration and settled on Cannibal's back in the form of a small, coconut-sized mass. "Purple. It's supposed to be epic level, right?" Rhaegar wondered aloud, his excitement palpable as he reached out to touch the glowing light. When he made contact, a cascade of bright purple sparks erupted, accompanied by the familiar beep of the system. "Relic successfully detected. Detection successful, determined to be an epic relic, Carnivorous flower." "Great, it's really an epic level reward, second only to legendary," Rhaegar exclaimed, a broad grin spreading across his face at the prospect of their newfound discovery. Immediately after, Rhaegar examined the text clues on the quest interface. "Rooted in death but blossoming with the light of life." Scowling, Rhaegar pondered the cryptic message. Carnivorous flower. Death and life. He examined the delicate follower in his hand, sensing that its activation must involve some interplay of life and death. After much deliberation, Rhaegar gave the order to land. Cannibal gracefully folded its wings and settled outside the city walls. The wildling army gathered, kneeling in reverence as Rhaegar approached. "Do you have any freshly hunted animals?" "Bodies will do," Rhaegar inquired. "Yes, Prince," a newly inducted member of the Crab Claw tribe replied eagerly, scurrying off to retrieve a stag carcass. Dismounting from the dragon's back, Rhaegar placed the carnivorous flower on the carcass. A faint glow emanated from the flower. In an instant, the stag's body disintegrated into a pile of dry bones, a spectacle that sent shivers down the spines of onlookers. Even Rhaegar himself was taken aback. He had not anticipated the flower's insatiable appetite. It seemed to demand more victims, its glow lingering as if demanding more. Quickly, Rhaegar ordered more animal carcasses to be brought forth, each meeting the same fate as the last. Fortunately, after several sacrifices, the flower seemed satiated. Its glow faded, accompanied by the familiar beep of the system. "Congratulations, carnivorous flower has been activated. You have received Life Essence. Grade, Epic, Purple. Effects, Majestic Vitality, stimulates latent talents. Evaluation, cannot be consumed by non-magical creatures." The flower's stamen withered, releasing a single drop of golden dew that landed in Rhaegar's palm. Examining the quest interface, Rhaegar's eyes widened in astonishment. Increasing vitality and talent. What an extraordinary ability! Reading the special notation in the evaluation column, Rhaegar shook the dewdrop and couldn't help but marvel. Even as a human with the Dragon Lord's bloodline, he had no innate magical abilities. He was not a magical creature and could not benefit from the effects of the dewdrop. He glanced back at Cannibal, who returned his gaze with great interest. The dragon's green eyes seemed to appraise the dewdrop in Rhaegar's hand. Stepping forward, Rhaegar raised his palm and smiled, "Here, Cannibal, this is your well-deserved reward." Cannibal had played a crucial role in finding the marsh marigold, so the dewdrop belonged to him. Cannibal stared at the dewdrop intently, then lowered himself and let out a low roar, bringing his dragon's snout closer to the ground. "Catch!" Rhaegar chuckled and tossed the dewdrop into Cannibal's mouth. In an instant, the tiny dewdrop dissolved in Cannibal's abyssal mouth, swallowed along with his saliva. "Swallow!" Cannibal swallowed obediently and lifted his head, shaking it slightly. Rhaegar watched Cannibal, looking for any changes. Roar! Apparently tired of Rhaegar's scrutiny, Cannibal flicked his tail and rolled it up, placing him on his spine. Then, without further ado, it soared over the outer walls of the castle. "Well, it looks like the dewdrop hasn't taken effect yet," Rhaegar muttered, gripping the dragon's scales tightly and feeling a tinge of disappointment. The cannibal settled outside the castle walls, his eyes closed in rest. Rhaegar was welcomed through the gates of Dire Den Castle, a marsh marigold tucked safely in his pocket. Despite the late hour, the castle's inhabitants showed no signs of sleep. Fear of the attempted assassination of their lord kept them alert and on edge. Entering the waiting room, Rhaegar found Sam, Sorrel, and Bart waiting anxiously. Sam was the first to speak, his voice tinged with relief and concern. "By the seven hells! You've returned safely at last. We feared the worst when you didn't arrive in time." Chapter 86, Shadowbinder. Rhaegar gently declined Sam's greeting and began to explain, "There was an incident on the journey, but it did not impede our progress." Sam's eyes darted between Rhaegar and the marsh marigold, his curiosity evident. "What happened? And why do you have our family crest flower with you?" With nothing to hide, Rhaegar recounted his experiences, from deciphering the forest witch's notes to finding the marsh marigold. As they listened, the faces of those gathered grew increasingly tense. It was amazing how much could change in just 10 hours of separation. Sorrel focused intently on the marsh marigold. "Prince, magic has been absent for so long. Are you sure the spells the forest witch left behind still work?" Rhaegar replied unperturbed, "There is only one way to find out. We must try. The steps of the Deadman's Murmur are not overly complex, it's a matter of having the right ingredients and perhaps a touch of talent. If I fail, perhaps one of you can try." He climbed the stairs to the attic, his anticipation palpable. The key to activating spells lies in the mind. "I may not have high hopes for success with the Deadman's Murmur spell, but we won't know until we try." "You speak wisely, Prince," Sorrel acknowledged, exchanging a glance with Bart before following Rhaegar to the attic. Sam trailed behind, his gaze fixed on the marsh marigolds with unbridled curiosity. In the cellar, the Shadowbringer's head remained in the center of a circle of candles. Rhaegar stepped carefully over the candles and placed the marsh marigold atop the skull. He instructed his servant to fetch some dove's blood and follow the procedure outlined in the forest witch's notebook to paint the skull. Then he took out a piece of paper with the translated spell. Though he despised it, he recited it anyway, driven by the hope of vanquishing the shadow monsters. Atala. Gugino. His recitation was strange, but his demeanor remained calm, as if he was reading from an ordinary book. The skull before him, however, showed no reaction. It didn't work. Rhaegar frowned, glancing back at Sam and the others before attempting the spell again. This time, as he recited it, Rhaegar's eyes narrowed slightly, his focus unwavering as he recited the spell with reverence. Buzz. The marsh marigold began to flicker with a shimmering light, coinciding with the cessation of Rhaegar's voice. Suddenly, an intense heat surged through his limbs and his body temperature soared. His pale skin flushed red, wisps of white smoke curling from his body as if he were emerging from a steaming basket. Whew! A flash of fire engulfed Rhaegar's hands, reducing the paper to ash in an instant, the remains drifting to the ground. His eyes widened in shock, and he stepped back as if recoiling from the sudden heat coursing through his body. "Is my blood boiling?" he muttered, the realization dawning on him as he felt the intense heat coursing through his limbs. Sam's voice broke through his confusion, tentative yet filled with wisdom. "Prince, I once heard my grandmother say that magic is a manifestation of choice. With dragon blood coursing through your veins, it's only natural that you would reject the necromantic magic that seeks to raise the dead." Rhaegar looked at him skeptically. "Do you know the laws of magic?" "No," Sam admitted, shaking his head. "I have never been exposed to magic, only the legends of the witches of the forest, passed down through generations." "Would you like to try, Lord Sam?" Rhaegar challenged, stepping out of the circle of candles. Magic was a fragmented puzzle lost to time, and his expectation of failure left him unfazed. But Sam's answer hinted at something more. Sam hesitated before answering, his expression a mixture of eagerness and uncertainty. "Old Sam, if you are willing, try. You carry the blood of the forest witch within you, perhaps it will respond to your touch." Sorrel interjected, his tone cool and commanding. Sam reluctantly agreed, his eagerness barely concealed beneath his facade. "Fine, I'll try it." Observing his demeanor, Rhaegar couldn't help but see through Sam's true intentions. Nevertheless, he gave him a new translation of the spell and urged him to memorize it. As a nobleman from Crack Claw Point, Sam's reading skills were lacking, so he needed Rhaegar's help to learn the short incantation. The trial began. Sam stepped into the circle of candles, holding the skull and marsh marigold in one hand and the translation in the other. With cracked lips, he began to recite the incantation. "Atala, Gugino." His voice, thick and trembling with excitement, filled the attic, but when the incantation ended, there was no response. Disappointment clouded Sam's expression as he stood frozen, the weight of failure evident in his posture. He rested his head on the floor and sighed heavily. "Prince, it seems I have failed as well." Rhaegar offered words of comfort, acknowledging the dormancy of magic over the years. "It's all right, Sam. It's only natural for ordinary people to struggle with magic." Turning to Sorrel with a wry smile, he continued, "We need to explore other avenues." Sorrel nodded in agreement, his expression grim. Just then, a chilling voice pierced the air, sending shivers down their spines. The Shadowbinder's head stirred, its pale skin glowing with an eerie reddish hue. His closed eyes fluttered open, revealing a glazed, disturbing gaze as he muttered incomprehensibly. At the same time, the marsh marigold wilted, its vibrant petals fading until only the rhizome remained, attached to the skull, sustaining its life. Sam, pale with fear, stumbled backward, nearly losing his balance. Bart, visibly shaken, trembled in silence. "Lord Sam, you did it!" Rhaegar exclaimed, taking a cautious step back to stand behind Sorrel. He had had enough of these bizarre events and wanted no part of whatever the talking head had in store. Enough was enough. Sam stared at the living skull, disbelief etched into every line of his face. He slapped himself twice, as if seeking confirmation of the truth, before turning tentatively to Rhaegar. "Prince, is it possible that it was I who brought this skull back to life?" Even as he asked the question, Sam found it hard to believe that such a miraculous feat could be accomplished with just a few words of magic. Rhaegar, avoiding Sam's gaze, offered a speculative answer. Who knows? Perhaps you have a latent talent for magic. Then he gave instructions. The Shadowbinder's head retains memories of his past life. Let's ask how to resolve this situation with the shadow creature. Nodding shakily, Sam stepped to the edge of the candle circle, his voice trembling as he addressed the skull. Tell us of your origins and why your remains have become a curse upon us. The skull rattled its mouth, its eyes fixed on the small group as if delving into forgotten memories. After a long silence, it uttered a faint, barely audible murmur. The ebb and flow of magical tides, depleted yet potent. Impatient for answers, Sam continued his questioning, urging the skull to provide clarity on the curse's invocation and its resolution. I am a servant of the Lord of Light, the skull began, his voice weak. A priest charged with predicting the fluctuations of magical energies. I sent my most elite shadows to observe the changing world. Increasingly frustrated by the cryptic answers, Sam interrupted tersely, get to the point, what's the solution to the curse? As Sam kicked the skull in frustration, a shiver ran down the spines of Rhaegar and the others. The skull's unsettling words, combined with Sam's actions, created an atmosphere of eerie dread that chilled them to the bone. Chapter 87, The Red Mask. The individuals who devised such dark magic, including the Forest Witch, are truly despicable, Bart remarked, his voice trembling with anxiety. However, his words went unnoticed amidst the unfolding events. Meanwhile, the Shadowbinder head continued his chilling whispers, recounting the grim details of the curse's origins. The curse is etched into the flesh of the Shadow's kin, he intoned, his voice filled with foreboding. Upon their death, their souls are consigned to the embrace of the cold god, the arbiter of mortal sins. He is the harbinger of death, stalking the living with relentless hunger, feasting on their shadows. His wrath can only be quenched by finding the token of the Lord of Light and returning it to his fallen servant. The revelation seemed to light up Sam's face with anticipation as he eagerly inquired about the token needed to appease the curse's wrath. The token? My mask. Where is my mask? The Shadowbinder's head suddenly erupted, his demeanor changing erratically as he fixated on the subject of the mask. Understanding dawned on Rhaegar as he turned to address the group. The Shadowbinder usually hides his identity behind a painted wooden mask, rarely revealing their true face. Sorrel, do you know where the mask might be? He asked. Sorrel nodded affirmatively. The Shadowbinder's mask is usually kept in the personal quarters of the former lord. It was considered a prized possession. Bart, eager to contribute, raised his hand. My brother kept the mask in his private chamber. It was removed when the soldiers took his head as proof of their victory. He tucked it away in a secret compartment for safekeeping. He always had a penchant for collecting trophies, Sorrel remarked with a hint of disdain, urging Bart to retrieve the mask immediately. Bart wasted no time in leaving the attic, seemingly relieved to escape the unsettling atmosphere. Meanwhile, Rhaegar's gaze fell on Sam, who hovered around the Shadowbinder's head with a mixture of fascination and apprehension. He persistently sought answers on how to defeat the shadow creature, while the skull's ramblings became increasingly erratic, alternating between mentions of the light of light and something about magical tides. Enough, at least I've gathered some clues, Rhaegar sighed, realizing the futility of further inquiry. But Sam seemed oblivious, his gaze fixed on the spinning skull, his fervor growing with each passing moment. Something is wrong, Sir Sorrel. Rhaegar's tone betrayed concern as he called to the knight for help. Responding quickly, Sorrel charged into the circle of candles, stopping the head's erratic movements with a powerful stomp before delivering a resounding blow to Sam's face, rendering him unconscious. As Sam lay sprawled on the ground, Sorrel quickly tied the head securely with a belt and fastened a dagger beside it. With the task complete, Sorrel hoisted the unconscious Sam onto his shoulders and glanced back at Rhaegar. Their shared look conveyed a sense of deep resignation. Concerned for Sam's well-being, Rhaegar asked anxiously, will Lord Sam be all right? Fear not, Prince. A mere magical trance, another blow will awaken him, Sorrel reassured, preparing to leave. Realizing the potential embarrassment of leaving Sorrel to handle the situation alone, Rhaegar stepped in and suggested, let Sam rest undisturbed. We'll leave him in the care of his guards. With a nod of agreement, Sorrel complied, and they quickly left the attic, leaving Sam and the subdued head of the Shadowbinder behind. Rhaegar could not shake the chill he felt at the sight of the head and hastened his departure. The next day, a throng of people gathered outside the walls of Dire Den, forming a formidable assembly. Among them were 200 soldiers from the House of Brune, 300 from the House of Crab, and over 2,000 free folk from the wildling army, each faction occupying its designated area. Dominating the sky, a black dragon spread its wings, casting an ominous shadow over half of the castle and serving as a stark reminder of the looming threat. Beneath the cannibal's towering form stood Rhaegar, clad in gloves and clutching a red-painted mask. The mask, with its simple yet sinister design, held a great importance. Turning his gaze to Bart, who waited with his head bowed, Rhaegar gave a decisive command, "Let us go." Bart hesitated, voicing his concern, "Prince, are we really abandoning the defences of the castle to face the shadow in the field? Did the castle protect your brother from the shadow creature's wrath?" Rhaegar's answer hung heavy in the air, causing Bart to fall silent. After a night of deliberation, Rhaegar had decided to take proactive measures. With each kill, the shadow creature grew stronger, leaving no room for delay. Armed with the Shadowbinder's head and the red mask token, coupled with Cannibal's formidable dragon flame, they had the means to confront it head-on. Sorrel agreed with Rhaegar's strategy. To him, the dragon embodied invincibility, capable of incinerating all manner of evil. Sam, now fully conscious, also regained his composure. He found himself astride a horse, the Shadowbinder's head in his hand, his gaze averting from the macabre head. Rhaegar's plan was to use the Shadowbinder's head as bait, a risky gambit, but one that might yield results. "Let's move." Rhaegar's command echoed as he mounted the cannibal and hovered above the wildling army. His orders spurred the crab claws into action, their ranks cheering as they brandished an array of weapons. For them, to fight alongside a dragon was an unparalleled honor. With Sorrel and Sam leading the way, the procession moved forward, their destination neither near nor far. Their path led to the clearing where the two houses had clashed before, a vast expanse that provided ample room for the cannibal's fiery breath to wreak havoc. When they arrived at the clearing, the remnants of the recent battle were still there, evident in the bloodstains and the lingering scent of death. Sam's gaze swept the area, his eyes flashing with anger at Sorrel's contingent. These bloodstains represented the lives of House Crab soldiers sacrificed in the conflict. Sorrel, however, remained indifferent. What did the dispute between the Brunes and the Crabs have to do with his branch, House Brune of Brown Hollow? Were it not for the deaths within his fiefdom and the pleas of a distant relative, Bart, he would not have intervened at all. As the cannibal descended upon the clearing, Rhaegar gave orders. "Surround the clearing with oil." "Understood, Prince," came the reply as House Brune soldiers set to work unloading barrels of oil from wagons. Shadow creatures feared fire, so Sorrel suggested surrounding the area with flames. Soldiers stood by, armed with flaming arrows to aid the effort. Meanwhile, Sam sprang into action. He led several hooded prisoners forward, thrusting the skull into the arms of one and saying, "Survive and your sins will be forgiven." "Mask, my mask." The skull's incessant muttering sent shivers down the spines of the prisoners, one of whom collapsed in terror, soiling himself. The head rolled to the ground, still muttering incoherently. Sam's expression wavered between horror and dismay as he watched. Rhaegar turned away from the scene, his thoughts on the skull's warning, the shadow creature would prey on the living. With nearly 3,000 people present, the risk of attack was high. Essentially, all present were bait, but the prisoners were in greater danger. Accepting the grim reality, offering the prisoners a chance at redemption through survival was a more humane alternative to execution. With everything in place, Rhaegar gave Cannibal a reassuring pat and gave the order, "Take flight." Given the shadow creature's recent abnormal behavior, it was clear that something had disrupted its usual fear of the dragon's flame. Still, if Rhaegar and Cannibal left the clearing, it would be easier to draw the shadow out. Instead of venturing far, they positioned themselves on a nearby mountain, ready to move in at the first sign of trouble below. Chapter 88, Shadow Wirm. As night fell, the plan slowly unfolded. The soldiers and horses of the three factions in the open field went about their routines, building campfires and settling in as if preparing for a peaceful night. But beneath this facade of tranquility, tension simmered. As darkness enveloped the landscape, a multitude of campfires lit up, casting flickering shadows that danced across the ground. In the midst of this orchestrated chaos, the savage army began to stir, their primal chants rising into the night. It was all part of the ruse, a performance designed to draw out their prey. But amidst the frenzied dance of flames and shadows, a subtle dissonance emerged. The rhythm of the shadows diverged from the pulsing beat of the dance, a subtle shift not lost on the wildling's keen eyes. A ripple of unease spread through the ranks as they sensed the impending danger. In a swift and coordinated move, the wildlings stopped their celebration, their expressions now edged with a mixture of fear and anticipation. "Sound the alarm!" Skyla's voice broke the tense silence as she quickly ignited an arrow and shot it into the night sky. Her actions spurred the others into action. With a chorus of shouts and the hiss of arrows cutting through the air, the savages prepared for battle, their weapons gleaming in the firelight. Meanwhile, the shadows, enraged by the disturbance, twisted and writhed with malevolent intent. Amidst the chaos, a serpentine tendril of shadow lashed out, its razor-sharp tip piercing the throats of unsuspecting victims, snuffing out their lives in an instant. "Scatter! The shadow is here!" The warning rang out, but for some it was too late. As the wildlings fell, panic swept through the remaining ranks, sending them scrambling for safety. But the shadow creature showed no mercy, its amorphous form coalescing into a grotesque creature with writhing tentacles, ready to strike at any moment. "Light the fire! Let's burn this fiend!" Skyla's voice cut through the clamor, her swift action inspiring courage in the face of danger. A brave soul, indeed, though her leadership lacked conviction. But it was Trainjal, the burly warrior of the Crawclaw tribe, who emerged as the true hero, wielding a sturdy wooden club as he rallied the terrified wildlings. "Stand your ground! If any of you run, I'll see to it that your heads are cut off." His thunderous roar silenced the chaos, creating a semblance of order amid the turmoil as the wildlings steeled themselves for the battle ahead. On the other side of the battlefield, Rhaegar sat astride Cannibal's back, patiently awaiting the signal and munching on sour wild fruit to replenish his strength. Suddenly, a faint flicker of fire streaked across the night sky, instantly drawing Rhaegar's attention. He lifted his eyes, wondering if his senses had deceived him. Moments later, a cluster of flames burst into view, confirming his suspicion. "It's time. Cannibal, let's go!" Rhaegar's voice crackled with determination as he urged his dragon into action. The impatient Cannibal roared in agreement, wings beating furiously as they descended from the mountain, hurtling toward the source of the fire. With only a few miles separating them, they quickly closed the gap, Cannibal's powerful wings propelling them forward at incredible speed. As they approached the clearing, chaotic shouts and the growing flames greeted them from below. Rhaegar surveyed the scene, noting the shadow creature's ominous growth. "Cannibal, ignite the surrounding oil," he ordered calmly, sticking to their carefully planned strategy. Positioning himself at the edge of the clearing, Cannibal unleashed a torrent of dragon flame, engulfing the surrounding area in a fiery inferno. The moment the emerald dragon flame touched the ground, it ignited the pre-poured oil in a spectacular display. In an instant, the flames erupted from a single point and spread rapidly in all directions, enveloping the entire clearing in a blaze that illuminated the night sky. Amidst the flames, the soldiers of all three factions stood in awe and disbelief, their apprehension replaced by a newfound sense of security as they gazed upon the majestic sight of the black dragon hovering above them. With the formidable creature at their side, their confidence soared, knowing that they had a powerful ally in this battle. "Roar!" Sensing the attention being directed his way, Cannibal's emerald eyes gleamed with pride as he raised his head and let out a thunderous roar that echoed through the air. "Cannibal, Dracarys!" Rhaegar's voice echoed with excitement as he gave the command. Boom! The emerald dragon flame leapt forth, slicing through the darkened earth and colliding head-on with the writhing shadow creature. In an instant, the beast was sliced in half by the ferocious blast of dragon breath. The crowd roared with excitement as they hailed the dragon's might, their cheers echoing across the battlefield. Thousands of soldiers, stationed separately under the banners of House Brune and House Crab, rushed forward in response, motivated by the dragon's charge. Led by a vanguard of torch-wielding cavalrymen, they charged toward the shattered remnants of the shadow creature, intent on delivering the final blow. But just as victory seemed within reach, the situation took a sudden turn. The severed halves of the shadow creature began to twist and contort, each fragment giving rise to smaller shadows. A billowing cloud of inky blackness erupted from the twisted mass, enveloping the charging cavalry in its suffocating embrace. Screams pierced the air as the riders, consumed by the shadowy haze, met a swift end. Roar! The dragon's roar echoed through the chaos, its emerald flames lashing out once more to sever another part of the shadow creature. But Rhaegar sensed something strange. The creature had deliberately disemboweled itself, sacrificing part of its body to escape the dragon's flames. What a cunning creature, Cannibal, strengthen the dragon flame! With a primal growl, the cannibal unleashed a torrent of searing green flames, engulfing the shadow creature in fire. Amidst the billowing black smoke, the shadow creature continued to twist and turn, bursting into fleeting flames before it could touch the ground. With nowhere to hide from the fire, the creature's form quickly shrank under the onslaught, teetering on the brink of destruction. Roar! Suddenly, a sinister rumble pierced the air, accompanied by a gust of wind that swept through the open space. Rhaegar's eyes snapped to the source, his expression taut with unease. To his horror, the shattered pieces of the shadow creature had reassembled into a grotesque, bipedal, two-winged creature, a shadow wyrm. Its wings, shrouded in an eerie black mist, bore the semblance of terrified faces, while its head, instead of that of a dragon, bore the grotesque visage of a one-eyed goat. In an instant, the shadow wyrm lashed out at the nearby humans, its head and tail sweeping them aside as it lunged at the cannibal with a menacing hiss. The cannibal, sensing the imitation, bristled with rage as he fixed his gaze on the approaching abomination. In a twisted mockery of its counterpart, the shadow wyrm scampered to its deformed feet, its wings flapping furiously as it struggled to reach the sky. Cannibal abandoned his dying prey and unleashed a torrent of dragon flame upon the impostor before him. Boom! The fiery blast struck its target with deadly precision, shattering the shadow wyrm skull and sending its gooey form reeling in a chaotic frenzy that nearly toppled it to the ground. Chapter 89, Headless Shadow. But the shadow wyrm proved resilient, gradually regaining its footing amid the chaos. Its writhing tentacles coalesced and morphed into a new one-eyed goat's head on its neck. Roar! The sight further fueled Cannibal's fury, causing him to rise higher into the sky, his wings beating with increased intensity as he unleashed torrents of dragon flame. With each blow, its form was shattered and rebuilt, yet it seemed to grow more agile, quickly adapting to Cannibal's attacks. Recognizing the pattern, Rhaegar urged Cannibal to stay alert, realizing that the creature was mimicking the dragon's movements. "Cannibal, stay alert. It's mirroring your every move," Rhaegar warned, his voice echoing over the tumultuous battle. Cannibal continued his assault, unleashing dragon flames from every angle. Meanwhile, the situation on the ground was rapidly deteriorating. The monstrous remnants of the shadow creature, still lurking amidst the chaos, continued to attack any living creature within range with their shadowy appendages. The night air was thick with the dissolved goo of the shadow wyrm, only to rise from the ground and attack again. In the face of overwhelming odds, the morale of the human forces plummeted. The once unified wildling army was now scattered, crumbling under the shadow's relentless onslaught. Driven by fear, many sought refuge beyond the outer ring of fire, their panicked flight adding to the chaos unfolding in the open space. In the heart of the clearing, prisoners lay sprawled on the ground, their ears filled with the shouts and screams of battle. Meanwhile, the Shadowbinder's head continued to mutter. "The shadow is coming, to slay all the living, to gather more shadows." A lone figure on horseback approached, reining in his mount with a decisive halt. Quickly dismounting, the figure grabbed the head and silenced it with a prepared rag. "Silence!" It was Sam, his guards scattered in the confusion, leaving him no choice but to retrieve the head himself. As he straightened, a sudden gust of wind alerted him to danger from behind. With a quick dodge, he deftly intercepted the attacker and severed the head with a swift stroke of his sword. The figure collapsed into a pool of viscous goo, writhing on the ground in agony. Sam quickly remounted and spurred his horse away from the battle. Elsewhere, the Brune soldiers, all under Sorrel's command, clashed fiercely with the shadows. Nearby, Bart crouched by a flickering campfire, protected only by two guards. A shadowy figure emerged from the ground, overpowering the guards and pinning Bart to the ground. Terrified, Bart flailed wildly and caught sight of the figure's blurred visage. In the distorted features, he saw a grotesque resemblance to his late brother, Wells. Bart's fear overwhelmed him and he involuntarily lost control of his bladder. With a desperate plea, he cried out, his eyes squeezed shut in terror, "Brother, I had nothing to do with your death, I swear. Please, spare me. I have never betrayed you or our family." High above, the cannibal, following Rhaegar's orders, engaged the shadow wyrn in a fierce battle. But his cries seemed futile against the relentless onslaught. Boom! Once again, the emerald dragon flame obliterated the shadow wyrm's brain, but this time it reacted differently. Without waiting for its brain to reform, it lunged forward, wings beating furiously as it charged the cannibal. From the goo dripping from its neck, a swirling black mist coalesced into a familiar figure, the headless shadow that had attacked Rhaegar and the cannibal earlier. Rhaegar's blood ran cold at the sight, his heart pounding with adrenaline. "Dracarys!" With a steely resolve fueled by a surge of emotion, Rhaegar's icy facade cracked and he gave the order to attack. In that moment, he understood the source of Cannibal's rage. The crude imitation stirred something primal in him, driving him to destroy the twisted mockery before him. Meanwhile, the shadow Wirm's head reappeared, setting the stage for a showdown between the two dragons. Cannibal's flames collided with his opponent's shadows as they clashed in the sky for the first time. Boom! The emerald flames tore through the shadow mist and collided with the shadow Wirm with unyielding force. In an instant, the shadow Wirm's brain and neck were incinerated into nothing. The headless shadow perched on its neck vanished into thin air. Continue the attack, Dracarys. Rhaegar's command echoed across the battlefield as he urged Cannibal on. The dragon responded with a rumbling growl, circling and unleashing flames. To Rhaegar's astonishment, the headless shadow reappeared on the back of the shadow Wirm. As they made contact, shadowy tentacles sprouted from the shadow Wirm's body and plunged into the headless figure. The shadow Wirm was restored to its former glory. At the same time, half of the shadows on the ground vanished, easing the chaos below. Damn it, it's consuming the other shadows, Rhaegar cursed. He warned the cannibal to increase the intensity of his dragon flame to prevent the production of the slimy substance. Roar! With renewed strength, the shadow Wirm let out a terrifying roar and charged at the cannibal, attempting to engage the dragon in close combat. The cannibal roared defiantly, unleashing dragon fire at its foe. In an instant, the shadow Wirm sliced through the dragon fire, leaving behind only one wing and half of its tail as it wrapped itself around the cannibal from below. Its body, adorned with shadow tentacles, slashed at the cannibal's scales. The black dragon's armor-like scales proved impenetrable, however, and it easily parried the attack. Seizing the opportunity, the cannibal sank his razor-sharp fangs into the shadow Wirm's neck, leaving a gaping wound. Despite the thrashing and twisting, the cannibal maintained its grip. Unbeknownst to Rhaegar, the true threat lurked unseen. The headless shadow, wielding a steel spike stained with dragon blood, stealthily made its way to the dragon's back. A surge of adrenaline coursed through Rhaegar as he sensed the impending danger, his body temperature rising and his skin flushing. A quick glance over his shoulder revealed the headless shadow, sending a shiver down his spine. Stifling his rising panic, he steeled himself for the confrontation, his face flushed and a glint of determination in his eyes. "I refuse to be defeated without a fight," he said, quickly pulling a bottle of oil from his storage bracelet. With practiced precision, Rhaegar ignited the cloth at the bottle's mouth and hurled it at the cannibal's pitch-black scales. Immediately, a fierce blaze erupted, engulfing the dragon and him in flames. Chapter 90, Defeating the Creature with Its Own Mask. Armed with the formidable enchantments of blood and fire and true dragon's blood, Rhaegar remained impervious to the scorching heat unleashed by the kerosene inferno. Despite this, the flames served to draw the encroaching shadows nearer, compelling them to converge. Yet, shadows were ephemeral entities, destined to distort and dissipate upon encountering the searing embrace of flames, rendering them harmless to Rhaegar. Amidst the crackling inferno, the cannibal sensed a shift in its master's emotions, prompting it to whirl around in alarm. With a thunderous roar, it confronted the advancing headless shadow crawling up its body. Discarding the remnants of the smoldering shadow Wirm, the cannibal unleashed a torrent of dragon flame, forming a barrier of searing emerald fire before it. With a powerful beat of its wings, it propelled itself forward, passing through the roaring conflagration unscathed. Reacting swiftly, Rhaegar hastily stowed away the red mask, shielding his face with one hand as he crouched. As the flames licked at his clothing, searing his skin with their heat, Rhaegar braced himself. Within the green flames, all shadows seemed to be obliterated. Unscathed, Rhaegar rose to his feet, scanning the surroundings with heightened vigilance. Yet, the headless shadow had vanished without a trace again, leaving him to lament its escape. With a resigned sigh, he retrieved a set of loose garments from his bracelet and swiftly changed into them. Roar! The timely roar from Cannibal jolted Rhaegar back to focus, prompting him to steady himself as the dragon descended, casting a shadow over the remnants of shadow Wirm. Even as the monstrous entities continued their relentless assault on the living, the battle raged on, far from its conclusion. Rhaegar retrieved the red-painted mask once more, contemplating its significance. "The mask is a token, but how can I return it?" he mused aloud, pondering headless shadow. Unlike other shadow creatures, this one possessed a distinct purpose, almost as if imbued with intelligence. Recalling its previous attacks, including the attempt on his life and the cannibal's tail, Rhaegar couldn't shake that the headless shadow was the Shadowbinder's original creation. A shadow without a head, and a mask. His thoughts raced, and suddenly, a realization dawned upon him. "Cannibal, lead me to those prisoners," he commanded abruptly, envisioning a plan to break the curse. Having teared the shadow Wyrm apart, Cannibal responded dutifully, soaring through the air while spewing dragon flames to vanquish the figures below, drawing closer to the prisoners at the heart of the clearing. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the clearing, the headless shadow reappeared, perched atop the monstrous creature, orchestrating another rampage to claim more lives and replenish the shadows lost in battle. Whoosh! A flaming arrow streaked through the air, piercing the chest of the headless shadow. Clutching the wound, the headless figure stopped, fixing its gaze on the source of the arrow, a girl with brown, curly hair who was reloading her bow for another shot. Twisting and contorting, the headless figure dissolved into a shadow, merging seamlessly and closing in on the girl. "Run! The dragon is coming!" Skyla shouted urgently, her voice drowned out by the chaos as a burly wildling shoved her aside, forcing her into the throng. With a roar, green dragon flames descended, engulfing the creatures. As the last remnants of the shadow were consumed by the dragon's flame, the battle drew to its end. The combined forces of the wildling army, the soldiers of House Brune and House Crab, stood united against the waves of shadows, wielding oil-coated weapons, drastically reducing casualties. Rhaegar and Cannibal landed on the ground, searching for the heads of the Shadowbinders among the slain prisoners, but it was nowhere to be found. Determined to find it, he called out to Skyla, "Have you seen the head of the Shadowbringer?" Before she could respond, another voice chimed in. "I have it. The skull is here." Bart, disheveled and panicked, ran towards Rhaegar, clutching the head with a distressed expression, his guards nowhere in sight. Meanwhile, Sam, tall and stout, fended off the approaching figures with his longsword, steadily making his way towards the dragon. Spotting Bart with the skull, Rhaegar's eyes sparkled as he urgently commanded, "Destroy it! Smash the head!" "Yes, Prince." Bart, momentarily bewildered, swiftly complied, tossing the skull into a nearby bonfire without hesitation. As the skull made contact with the flames, black smoke billowed forth, but any attempt to howl was stifled as it was quickly reduced to charred remains, crumbling to bone under the trampling feet of the crowd. Buzz! A profound silence fell over the scene. The shadows seemed frozen, allowing the living to cut them down, each one reverting to nothing as they fell. Amidst the scattered bone fragments, a headless figure emerged. He watched as the empty neck writhed, gradually giving rise to a new head, a face identical to that of the slain Shadowbinder. Yet, devoid of emotion, the face remained quiet. Though its mouth opened as if to speak, how could a mere shadow speak? In a swift transition, the headless figure adjusted to its new appearance, and the shadows on the ground began to stir once more. "Skyla, shot it!" Rhaegar's command. Whoosh! An arrow flew, its tip piercing a red mask, aimed directly at the shadow of the Shadowbinder. Splat! The arrow struck true, embedding itself in the Shadowbinder's forehead, the red mask enveloping its face. In an instant, the red mask unleashed an infinite suction force, swallowing the shadow within. With the disappearance of the Shadowbinder's shadow, all the shadows in the clearing dissipating into wisps of black smoke that dispersed on the wind. Even the monstrous creatures and remnants of the Shadow Wyrm could not withstand the wind, shriveling and crumbling into dust. In the blink of an eye, the enemy vanished, leaving the stunned onlookers in disbelief. They still lingered in a state of uncertainty, their eyes scanning the clearing for any sign of the battle's resolution. Did it work? Rhaegar's voice carried a note of skepticism as he watched the shadow creatures vanish into thin air. Cannibals growled, lazily shifting its weight and stretching its wings, a assurance that the danger had passed. The wildling army and soldiers, their muscles still tensed from combat, turned their attention to the young prince and the dragon. Uncertain if the curse had truly been lifted, their resolve remained steadfast as long as the dragon and its rider stood beside them. Interpreting Cannibal's demeanor, Rhaegar couldn't help but feel a surge of admiration. Who would have thought defeating the shadow creature could be so straightforward? He mused, aware of the expectant gazes fixed upon him. After a brief moment of contemplation, he straightened his posture upon the dragon's back, raising his arm high to address the assembled crowd. Among them were wildling savages, armored soldiers, and nobles like Sam and Bart. After a brief moment of contemplation, he straightened his posture upon the dragon's back, raising his arm high to address the assembled crowd. Among them were wildling savages, armored soldiers, and nobles like Sam and Babette. As Cannibal shifted beneath him, lifting him higher, Rhaegar took a deep breath of the moonlit air, his voice resonating with authority. Gentlemen, after all your efforts, I am pleased to announce. The curse is over. The declaration reverberated across the desolate battlefield, the hoarse yet powerful voice like music to their ears. We've won. Curse be damned, we've triumphed. Long live the dragon! Long live the prince! Their joyous cries filled the air, weapons raised in celebration of their hard-won victory. Surveying the jubilant throng, Rhaegar felt an inexplicable surge of excitement, a smile spreading across his face. He hadn't relied on his family, it was him and Cannibal against the dreaded curse. This was their adventure. Their first triumph together. My friend, we did it! Rhaegar exclaimed, his praise directed at the towering figure of Cannibal. Chapter 91, A New Blessing. Meanwhile, on Dragonstone Island. Beneath the night sky, a figure stealthily slipped out of the castle, navigating the shadows with practiced ease. With caution in every step, it made its way to the shoreline. Compared to a few days ago, the scenery changed, several inverted spears stuck on the shallow beach where the tide was rising, forming an atmosphere. Through the dim moonlight, it was possible to vaguely make out several heads stuck on spears. Heads of dragon keepers, servants, and guards. The figure moved swiftly, making a beeline for a secluded cove where a small boat awaited. As Rhaenyra approached, Robert emerged from the shadows, his concern evident. Princess, the sea vessel is prepared, but are you sure about this? I know what I must do, Lord Robert, Rhaenyra replied, her weariness evident beneath the moon's gentle glow. Stepping onto the boat, her resolve unwavering, she spoke with determination. Rhaegar has been missing for too long, and my father has yet to uncover any leads. I must return to King's Landing to search for my dragon. Princess, Prince Rhaegar has his dragon by his side. Perhaps the situation isn't as dire as it seems, Robert attempted to reason. But Rhaenyra shook her head, a heavy sigh escaping her lips. I have waited long enough. With that, she gestured to the sailors to set the small boat adrift, guiding it towards the awaiting vessel anchored in the vast expanse of the sea. Meanwhile, within the castle's confines, Viseis lay upon his bed, his slumber disrupted by a restless stirring. A flicker of emotion crossed his serene features, his brow knitting with unease. In his dreams, he had many visions. A fire erupted from the heart of King's Landing, spreading it across the expanse of the Seven Kingdoms. Amidst the fire, a figure emerged, a young man astride a black dragon, his hair shimmering like molten silver. Brandishing a sword and spear with effortless grace, he cut through hordes of enemies. None could stand against him, succumbing either to dragon fire or his weapon. Amidst the chaos, a crown of darkness adorned his brow, a symbol of sovereignty forged in blood and flame. Viserys recognized that it was the crown Aegon the Conqueror had worn at his coronation. As the flames danced higher, the features of the youth became clearer, drawing Viserys' gaze with an insatiable curiosity. With bated breath, he strained to discern the face that emerged from the conflagration. And then, in a moment of revelation, recognition dawned upon him. Rhaegar. The name escaped his lips in a startled murmur, a testament to the profound impact of the vision that had seized his slumbering mind. Plop! Startled awake by the echoes of his cries, Viserys bolted upright in bed, his heart racing by his dream. Gasping for air, beads of cold sweat dotted his brow. Rhaegar. It must be Rhaegar. He muttered breathlessly. For a fleeting moment, he hesitated, grappling with the surreal remnants of his dream before the truth solidified in his consciousness. The visage of the young man, atop the back of a black dragon, was unmistakable, his firstborn, Rhaegar Targaryen. In that instant of clarity, Viserys remembered. The last remaining black dragon in all the lands, Cannibal, is under his son's command. As his thoughts swirled, Viserys reached for the glass and bottle by his bedside, seeking solace in the familiar embrace of wine. A soft knock interrupted. It was Harold's voice, tinged with concern. Your Majesty, are you awake? Brushing the remnants of sweat from his brow, Viserys replied wearily, yes, just a dream. With a creak, the door yielded to Harold's gentle push, allowing the captain of the King's Guard to enter. Your Majesty, your sleep has been very bad lately, Harold said, his brow furrowing with worry. Viserys offered a weary smile, his voice tinged with a newfound sense of purpose. It's of no consequence. These dreams, they're different. Savoring a sip of wine, a spark ignited within Viserys' tired eyes, his weariness momentarily eclipsed by excitement. This dream, it's the one I've long sought. And now, it's finally found me. Harold's brow furrowed in confusion as he listened to Viserys' words. Prepare a grand feast, I have a feeling my son is returning, Viserys declared, his voice tinged with an unwavering conviction. Your Grace, Prince Rhaegar's whereabouts are still unknown. It may not be prudent to celebrate prematurely, Harold interjected, his tone laced with bitter persuasion. Viserys' expression shifted dramatically, his features taking on a solemn gravity. No. My son has returned. He is the Prince of Prophecy, born amidst blood and fire. Your Grace. Harold faltered, at a loss for words. To him, it seemed as though the king's longing had clouded his judgment, leaving him somewhat bewildered. Viserys chose not to dwell on Harold's skepticism, instead shifting his focus to more pressing matters. How did the investigation fare? The dragon guards and dragon keepers on the island have been questioned, and several hidden passageways within the castle have been discovered. There are signs of recent activity within, Harold reported, his expression hesitant. One of these passages leads to the Queen's chambers, he added, his voice tinged with uncertainty. Alicent. Viserys' features registered a mixture of shock and contemplation. You suspect the Queen's involvement in Rhaegar's disappearance. This possibility cannot be discounted, Your Majesty. However, concrete evidence is needed before any conclusions can be drawn, Harold analyzed objectively. Viserys closed his eyes briefly, his countenance betraying no discernible emotion as he contemplated the gravity of the situation. After a moment of silence, he reopened his eyes, resolve etched into his features. Initiate covert surveillance on Alicent's activities. Report any findings to me immediately. Yes, Your Grace, Harold affirmed, nodding in acknowledgement of the king's orders. Just as Viserys was preparing to depart, a sharp knock echoed from the door, and Robert's voice pierced through the silence. Your Majesty, the princess has clandestinely departed the castle and returned to King's Landing by boat, Robert informed, his tone tinged with urgency. 7 hells! Who dares to defy my orders? Viserys erupted in fury, his voice reverberating through the room as he vented his frustration. Summon the maesters at once. Order them to dispatch a message to have Rhaenyra placed under house arrest the moment she sets foot in King's Landing. As you command, Your Grace, Robert responded promptly, his demeanor reflecting a mixture of apprehension and deference. With a sense of dismay lingering in the air, Robert hurriedly made his exit, feeling torn between his duties to the king and his loyalty to the princess. In the end, he found himself caught in the crossfire. As the first light of dawn filtered through the window, Rhaegar stirred in his bed, roused by the familiar beep of his system. Exploration complete. Retrieve the lost treasures, the notification flashed across his screen. Blinking away the remnants of sleep, Rhaegar's gaze fell upon the red-painted mask nestled beside him. The exploration complete. He murmured, his mind slowly clearing as he reached for the mask. Cursed Mask of the Shadow. Exploration progress, 100%. As he absorbed the information displayed before him, Rhaegar felt a surge of satisfaction. Last night's battle replayed in his mind, and he broke the curse. Beside the red mask lay a faint purple glow, catching Rhaegar's attention. With a smile, he extended his hand, poking at the halo. Relic retrieval successful. Initiating detection. The system announced. Detection complete. Epic relic identified, Blessing of the Lord of Light. With a metallic clink, a black iron token adorned with a crimson heart fell into Rhaegar's palm. Studying the token intently pondering. A blessing? Like the White Heart's blessing. He mused, reading the system text about the token. The power of the gods lies dormant within. Do not underestimate it, for it shall unveil miracles in your time of need, he read aloud. Rhaegar carefully stowed away the token, recognizing that its potential. Perhaps, in the future, an opportunity would arise to unlock its hidden powers. Let's get up. Rhaegar's voice echoed through his chambers as he roused himself from slumber and donned his attire. The Shadow was killed and his adventure in the peninsula had ended, now it's time to go back to Dragonstone Island and join his family again. Chapter 92, Celtigar. Diarden Castle. Within its walls, the formidable figure of Cannibal rested, his massive form sprawled on the ground, his breath sending waves of heat. Approaching the dragon, Rhaegar's gaze met its closed pupils and he reached out to stroke the creature's muzzle. Doubtfully, he addressed the dragon, his words fraught with uncertainty, Cannibal, are you feeling depressed today? In response, a low roar escaped the dragon's throat, its massive frame shifting slightly as it conveyed its feelings. It feels its own strength, Rhaegar interpreted, a wry smile gracing his lips. It's disappointed it didn't get a chance to fully unleash it last night. Chuckling softly, Rhaegar reassured the dragon, "Fear not, my friend. When we return to Dragonstone Island, we can find those two dragons and take our frustration out on them." Their bond strengthened with each passing day, and Rhaegar had no doubt that with Cannibal at his side, they would emerge victorious against Vermithor and the wounded Silverwing. As their conversation continued, a group of figures approached, their presence drawing Rhaegar's attention. Turning to face them, he recognized Sam, Bart, and Skyla, their expressions a mixture of caution and reverence for the black dragon beside him. As they approached, they knelt before him. Rhaegar was taken aback by their display. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice tinged with surprise. Sam spoke first, his words filled with loyalty. "Prince, you led us to defeat the curse. We hope you will continue to lead us in the future." Bart echoed his sentiments, his tone repentant. "My brother has made serious mistakes. While I dare not hope for the king's forgiveness, I ask only that you accept the loyal service of House Brune and allow us to atone for our sins by your side." As Rhaegar's gaze settled on Skyla, he couldn't help but admire her bravery in the battle the night before. After a moment of reflection, Rhaegar replied softly, "I promised Falcon that I would take care of his tribe. I will bring what remains of the Falcon tribe with me. But what do you want?" Skyla raised her head, determination in her eyes as she spoke boldly, "Prince, you have worked tirelessly for the peninsula. You should not abandon the fruits of your labor and leave." "The fruits of my labor?" Rhaegar asked, confused by her words. Skyla calmly explained, "You broke the curse and saved the people of the peninsula. You were to gather them all and accept their allegiance. And then?" Rhaegar inquired further. "You can unite the nobles and wildlings of the peninsula and become the first hero to unite the region in nearly 100 years. You will return to your family with honor," Skyla continued. Rhaegar hesitated, considering her words carefully. Before he could answer, Sam offered his advice. "Prince, the people of the peninsula are eagerly awaiting your presence. You should meet with them." With a slight frown, Rhaegar nodded in agreement and let them lead him to the city walls. Outside the wall, a diverse gathering had gathered, House Brune, House Crab, the Wildling army, and numerous small noble families they had encountered before. As Rhaegar stepped onto the city wall, the entire assembly fell to their knees, heads bowed in reverence. Despite the silence, the intensity of their gazes was deafening. Watching this display, Rhaegar was taken aback. He turned to Sam and the others. "Do they swear allegiance to me?" he asked. "Yes, hero of the peninsula, Prince of Targaryen," Sam and the others replied in unison, affirming their loyalty with bowed heads and kneeling forms. Rhaegar sighed softly, a sense of resignation coloring his words. "Let them rise. I am about to leave." "Prince, I implore you to accept the loyalty of the nobles," one of them urged. "Prince, the crab claws you appointed to fight for you are still following your orders," another added. The air was thick with anticipation as Rhaegar pondered their pleas. After a long silence, he relented. "All right. Raise your heads, I accept your allegiance." Reflecting on the previous night's victory, Rhaegar couldn't help but feel a sense of fulfillment. The admiration and respect in the eyes of these people was unfamiliar, yet gratifying. Surveying the scene before him, Rhaegar realized that this hospitality was hard to resist. Upon hearing the prince's acceptance, the gathering erupted in joyous celebration. Under Bart's coordination, the nobles of the peninsula gathered in the waiting room of Dyerden, where they knelt before Rhaegar and pledged their allegiance. They won the wager. Skyla, accompanied by Trangle, the representative of the Crab Claws, sought an audience with Rhaegar. Trangle, tall and bear-like, spoke in a mumbled tone, "Prince, some of the free folk wish to return to the wilderness, while 1,000 wish to go with you." Rhaegar nodded in acknowledgement and issued a command, "Calculate the total number of free men, including the remnants of the Hawk tribe and their families." Despite his reservations about their naivety, he acknowledged their loyalty and sacrifice. "About 2,000, mostly women and children," Skyla reported. Rhaegar then considered the logistics of accommodating such a group. "Transporting 2,000 will require a large ship." Skyla interjected confidently, "The nobles of the peninsula may lack large ships, but I know where we can find one." "Tell me more," Rhaegar demanded. Skyla hesitated for a moment before speaking, her voice muffled, "The Celtigar House of Claw Isle. They've been loyal to the Targaryen dynasty for generations and have a formidable fleet. Are you related to the Celtigars? Rhaegar inquired, intrigued by her reluctance. Scylla bowed her head even lower, her teeth clenched in frustration. Yes, Bartimos Celtigar. He's my father, but I'm just a bastard, born to a fisherman's daughter. Then why did you end up here at Crack Claw Point? Rhaegar inquired quietly. There was resentment in Scylla's answer. Bartimos despises bastards, regardless of our circumstances. I was born to a different woman than Tormund, and fate led us to work together on a ship. After a shipwreck, Tormund and I were washed ashore at Crack Claw Point, where we were taken in by Uncle Falcon. Scylla's hands clenched, her voice filled with resentment at their circumstances. It's unfair. Rhaegar sighed, understanding her plight. I'll go to Claw Isle and borrow a boat. Meanwhile, you organize the free folk to leave with us. Despite the lingering prejudice they faced, Rhaegar chose not to dwell on their past. He had no desire to reopen old wounds or add to their pain. Rhaegar led Cannibal to Claw Isle, which lay east of Crack Claw Point and near the Whispers. With Cannibal's impressive speed, they crossed the mid-sea in a matter of minutes and quickly reached the island. Claw Isle, under the leadership of House Celtigar, is a large island in the sea. Much like House Velaryon, House Celtigar traces its lineage back to the days of Old Valyria and accompanied the Targaryens on their journey to West Eros. Members of House Celtigar boast Valyrian ancestry and are characterized by their distinctive silver hair and piercing purple eyes. Known for their unwavering loyalty, the Celtigars have served the Targaryens faithfully for generations to the present day. As they approached Claw Isle, Rhaegar surveyed the sprawling city below Cannibal Mountain. A towering castle graced the rolling hills. It's here, Rhaegar murmured, giving Cannibal a reassuring pat before signaling him to land outside the castle walls. Roar! Cannibal circled the castle, releasing a burst of dragon flame as if to announce the arrival of the strongest wild dragon. Cannibal landed, creating a gust of wind. The dragon's imposing figure loomed over the castle walls, dwarfing the soldiers and horses inside. The sudden appearance of the dragon sent shockwaves through Claw Isle. Though the guards on the city walls trembled with fear, they held their ground and refused to flee. Mounted on Cannibal, Rhaegar stood almost eye to eye with the guards. In a calm tone he addressed them, "Go and summon your lord. Tell him the Targaryen prince has arrived." Chapter 93, An unexpected meeting with Lionel. Yes, just a moment. The captain of the guards, armored, cast fearful glances at the imposing Cannibal before hastening down the wall. The dragon's arrival had undoubtedly drawn attention, evident from the open gates of the castle. A procession emerged, arranged in 2 rows, with attendants bowing their heads in deference to the dragon's presence. Among them walked several nobles, adorned in fine attire, led by an elderly man with a dignified countenance. His silver hair, a hallmark of Valyrian descent, thinned at the crown, while his keen blue eyes betrayed a shrewdness. The group moved with purpose, yet maintained their composure until they reached the gate, pausing to regard the prince astride the dragon's back. "Cannibal, lower me," Rhaegar requested softly. Roar! The dragon emitted a low growl, lowering its body to allow its rider to dismount. Maintaining a distance of 100 meters, both parties observed each other. The assembled group dared not approach the dragon, instead standing before the city gate to pay their respects. Rhaegar approached slowly, his gaze scanning the line of individuals until it settled on a familiar face. "The 7 gods have blessed me, allowing me to meet the prince here." "How wonderful!" exclaimed a rounded figure, quickly advancing from across the room with an agitated expression. Before Rhaegar could utter a word, a smile spread across his face as he greeted, "Lord Lionel, why are you here?" The figure revealed itself to be none other than Lionel Strong, the former hand of the king. Despite his quick steps, Lionel's stomach jiggled slightly, unable to contain his joy. "Prince, your well-being brings me great relief. I've been scouring the narrow sea in search of your whereabouts." Ever since Rhaegar's dragon vanished, Lionel had been dispatched to search tirelessly. Recently, he had visited Driftmark, home to the Velaryon family, before unexpectedly encountering Rhaegar during a visit to the Celtigar family on Claw Isle. Upon their meeting, Lionel bent down laboriously, his hands inspecting Rhaegar as if checking for injuries. With a soft laugh, Rhaegar reassured him, "I'm fine. My dragon landed in Crack Claw Point to recover from its injuries, and I've only just returned a few days ago." His words were not deceitful. Cannibal had indeed suffered severe injuries and had returned recently. However, the journey had been fraught with twists and turns, though he had been away from Dragonstone Island for less than 10 days in total. Relieved to find the prince unharmed, Lionel expressed, "Prince, your absence without any news had the king and the princess greatly concerned for your safety. I apologize for causing them worry. I encountered a few obstacles, but I resolved them as quickly as I could," Rhaegar replied, moved by his father and sister's concerns. "It's a relief that you're safe," Lionel remarked, straightening up. He then led Rhaegar towards the city gates, introducing him to Lord Bartimos Celtigar, the patriarch of the Celtigar family and the ruler of Claw Isle. Rhaegar nodded respectfully to Lord Bartimos, acknowledging his father's loyal bannerman. "Greetings, Lord Bartimos." Lord Bartimos reciprocated with a courteous smile, gesturing towards the castle entrance. "It is an honor to host you on Claw Isle, Prince. Please, allow us to extend our hospitality." Rhaegar accepted graciously, saying, "The honor is mine, Lord Bartimos." With Lionel by his side, Rhaegar proceeded into the castle. As a renowned maritime family, the Celtigar lineage paralleled the Valyrians, initially amassing wealth through taxes levied on ships. With a formidable fleet at their disposal, they ventured into maritime trade, rapidly accumulating riches within a few generations. Upon entering the castle, Rhaegar was immediately struck by the opulence that permeated the halls. Luxurious mill carpets lined the floors, windows boasted Valentine glass, and walls shimmered with gold and silver embellishments. Surveying the room, Rhaegar couldn't help but marvel at the wealth on display. "Rich as hell," he mused inwardly. Bartimos, ever eager to maintain appearances, observed Rhaegar's admiration with a self-satisfied smile. "Prince, forgive the modesty of our welcome. While we couldn't throw a grand reception, the kitchen has prepared a fitting banquet to honor Lord Lionel." Though Bartimos feigned regret, Rhaegar was unfazed. His visit was not merely social, he had come with purpose. As the servants busied themselves with banquet preparations, Bartimos engaged Rhaegar and Lionel in conversation. Lionel recounted the events on Dragonstone Island during Rhaegar's absence, raids, executions, and Rhaenyra's fervent appeals to search for her brother. In turn, Rhaegar shared his own adventures in the peninsula, leaving his hosts astonished by the tales of curses and magic. Bartimos, skeptical, questioned, "Prince, do you truly believe that magic has invaded Crack Claw Point?" Without hesitation, Rhaegar affirmed, "Certainly." Lionel, more diplomatic, interjected, "Prince, magic has long been deemed a legend by most. Its resurgence is quite unexpected." Rhaegar posed a thought-provoking query: if dragons were to vanish, would the world dismiss them as mere legend? The room fell silent as both Bartimos and Lionel grappled with the implications of Rhaegar's words, uncertain of how to respond. Bartimos chuckled, his hand resting on his palm. "Indeed, Prince Rhaegar speaks truth. In my youth, I traversed the narrow sea aboard ships, encountering many adventures." Seated comfortably on a plush cushion, Rhaegar broached his request earnestly. "My lord, I've come to Claw Isle seeking to borrow a boat to transport the free people who have pledged allegiance to me. I implore your generous assistance." Bartimos hesitated, his gaze shifting to Lionel, who remained silent. It was clear that such a seemingly trivial request as borrowing a ship for transportation wasn't as straightforward when it involved a group of peninsula savages. Aware of the unspoken concerns, Rhaegar turned to Lionel, suggesting, "If you doubt my words, accompany me to Crack Claw Point to witness the truth firsthand. The nobles there have already sworn their loyalty to me." At Rhaegar's proposition, the room fell into a palpable silence. Lionel's eyes gleamed with an enigmatic intensity as if peering into the depths of Rhaegar's intentions. Meanwhile, Bartimos contemplated, recalling his interactions with the peninsula nobles. They were known for their barbaric and confrontational nature, often engaging in skirmishes and petty feuds. Given their formidable military prowess and the presence of Rhaegar's wildling followers, Bartimos realized the potential strategic advantage of securing their allegiance. After all, even cannon fodder could tip the scales in a conflict. Chapter 94, Reunion at Sea. Without waiting for Lionel to interject, Bartimos solemnly declared, "Prince, the Celtigar family has always been loyal to the royal family, and we shall honor your request. Borrowing a ship may have seemed a trifling matter, but securing the favor of the king's eldest son held far greater significance." Claw Isle lay just a few hours' sail from Dragonstone, a journey even quicker if undertaken by a mighty dragon. Given the circumstances, it made sense to acquiesce rather than decline, so it was necessary that the princes returns to island to make preparations. While Rhaegar was puzzled over the subtle dynamics, he sensed that Bartimos harbored certain expectations of him. Nevertheless, he remained indifferent to it. Tightening his smile, Rhaegar graciously replied, "Your assistance is greatly appreciated, my lord." Bartimos's smile remained as he affirmed, "I shall ensure that the ships are prepared promptly for the journey to Crack Claw Point." Only then did Lionel emerge from his reverie. Casting a glance at Bartimos, he subtly lowered his head, opting to maintain a modest profile. With his well-honed political acumen, Lionel discerned that the prince's return to Dragonstone Island would likely provoke significant upheaval. Given the circumstances, it was necessary to exercise caution and refrain from drawing attention to himself. 2 days later, 3 majestic sailing ships set sail from Crack Claw Point, their decks crowded with ragged but determined souls bound for Dragonstone. A resounding dragon's roar pierced the air, and massive wings eclipsed the ships it soared into the skies. Standing atop the ship's prow, Rhaegar looked at the endless expanse of sea. Lionel approached from behind, his voice a whisper amidst the wind, "Prince, word arrived last night by Raven, the princess has returned to King's Landing in secret, escorted to the Red Keep by the King's Guard for safety. Is she attempting to utilize the dragons to locate me?" Rhaegar pondered aloud, his thoughts drifting to Syrax's confinement within the dragon's pit. "Yes, the princess has been fraught with worry since the dragon incident that fateful night," Lionel murmured empathetically. "Once I've met with my father, I shall swiftly journey to King's Landing to reunite with Rhaenyra." Rhaegar's lips curved into a knowing smile, acknowledging the myriad advantages of dragon ownership, particularly in matters of expediency. Suddenly, a thunderous dragon's roar rent the air, echoing from above. Rhaegar raised his gaze skyward to behold the cannibal's imposing form, its gaze fixed intently on the horizon, as if issuing a warning. In response, a second, less formidable roar reverberated through the air, prompting the occupants of the ships, both freemen and sailors, to emerge from their cabins, gazing upward in awe and trepidation at the spectacle unfolding above. In the distance, a golden dragon emerged into view, capturing the attention of the onlookers below. Perched upon the dragon's back was a young girl adorned in a sleek black dragon barding. Rhaegar's heart leapt at the sight of the golden dragon, his excitement palpable. Spotting the girl atop the dragon, Rhaenyra, he couldn't contain his shock and cried out, "Rhaenyra!" Unaware of his presence, Rhaenyra's attention was drawn to the cannibal, the imposing black dragon now under Rhaegar's command. Her gaze momentarily flickered down to the trio of ships sailing below, hoping to catch sight of Rhaegar. Sensing its rider's agitation, Cannibal set aside its hostility toward the other dragon and descended gracefully to sea level. With claws slicing through the waves, the cannibal surged toward the large ship carrying Rhaegar. In a breathtaking maneuver, the dragon's head soared upward as its colossal body ascended into the sky. With practiced precision, the long tail swept up Rhaegar, who awaited on his armor, before gently placing him upon its back. Seated astride the dragon, Rhaenyra urged her dragon, drawing closer to Rhaegar in mid-air. A resounding roar echoed through the air as the cannibal, dwarfing its counterpart in size, confronted Syrax, the golden-scaled dragon, causing it to tense and emit a warning roar. Witnessing the spectacle from her vantage point, Rhaenyra's excitement grew as she recognized Rhaegar's figure, exclaiming, "Rhaegar!" With a gentle touch, she reassured Syrax in High Valyrian, soothing its nerves. Before long, Rhaegar was airborne, riding alongside Rhaenyra on her golden dragon. The two dragons faced each other in the vast expanse of the sky, one black and the other golden-brown, while Rhaenyra and Rhaegar exchanged glances. Rhaenyra's appearance spoke volumes, her disheveled hair, reddened eyes, and worn countenance betraying the turmoil within as she gazed unwaveringly at Rhaegar. "Rhaegar!" Her voice faltered, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. Rhaegar returned his sister's gaze, his eyes alight with the joy of their reunion, and exclaimed in astonishment, "Sister, I thought you were still confined within the Red Keep. What brings you here?" Struggling to maintain her posture amid her evident distress, Rhaenyra's voice wavered as she replied, "I couldn't bear to be apart from you any longer." "They couldn't stop me, not yet." Rhaegar was deeply moved by her determination. Upon closer observation, he noted the toll that recent events had taken on Rhaenyra. Compared to their last meeting, fatigue lingered beneath her eyes, mingling with the telltale signs of sleepless nights. With a soft voice, Rhaegar called out, "Sister." Rhaenyra's eyes welled up with tears as she spoke solemnly, "Come back with me, Rhaegar." "Of course, I've missed you all dearly," Rhaegar responded, his tone gentle and reassuring. Obediently, he followed Rhaenyra's lead as she directed Syrax towards Dragonstone Island. "Let's follow suit, Cannibal," Rhaegar said with a warm smile, guiding the dragon to trail behind Syrax, their forms weaving amidst the billowing clouds. Although vastly disparate in age and size, the two dragons moved in tandem through the skies. Rhaenyra maintained a cautious distance, mindful not to unsettle Rhaegar's mount. Despite the circumstances, Rhaegar felt a swell of happiness. This was their inaugural flight together, a moment to cherish amid the turbulence of their current reality. Before long, the two siblings disembarked from their respective dragons, leaving the ship behind as they arrived at Dragonstone Island well ahead of schedule. Syrax, who had maintained a wary vigilance in the presence of Cannibal during their journey, landed eagerly on the cliffs adjacent to the beach, while Rhaenyra kept a watchful eye on her brother. Upon seeing her touch down, Rhaegar attempted to follow suit, but Cannibal shook its head adamantly, refusing to land and instead opting to circle the sky above. Realization dawned on Rhaegar: there were still two adult dragons on Dragonstone Island harboring deep-seated animosity towards Cannibal. Recalling their previous dragon skirmish, Rhaegar's heart quickened with anticipation, though he steeled himself for the confrontation ahead. With a reassuring pat to Cannibal's spine, he murmured, "Let's do this, old friend. Show them what you're made of." In response, Cannibal snorted defiantly, spreading its mighty wings wide and arching its neck as dragon flames brewed within its throat. Roar! In an instant, Cannibal unleashed a deafening roar that reverberated across Dragonstone Island, its fiery breath painting the sky with vibrant hues, heralding the return of the strongest wild dragon. Roar! Roar! Echoing its cry, two other dragon roars soon pierced the air, tinged with the unmistakable fury of provocation. Perched atop Cannibal's back, Rhaegar surveyed the rugged terrain below, awaiting the arrival of adversaries long absent. Before long, two colossal dragons of varying hues emerged from the mountains, soaring skyward with determined purpose. One bore a resplendent bronze hue, its eyes ablaze with fury, its formidable presence akin to that of a seasoned predator, Vermithor. The other, a light green dragon, bore the scars of past battles, a chunk missing from its neck and one wing hanging limp, Silverwing, struggling but resolute in its ascent. Chapter 95, Another Dragon's Dance. When rivals come face to face, their eyes seem to burn with intensity. As the two adult dragons soared into the sky, their roars reverberated, accompanied by the crackling of dragon flames. The Cannibal, with its human-like pupils, looked over its opponents. Unlike the Cannibal, who had ingested the marsh marigold to heal, Silverwing bore more grievous wounds. Severely injured, Silverwing remained grounded in its nest, its ability to fly compromised and its fury its only sustenance. It posed little threat in its current state. Thus, today's sole adversary was the Bronze Fury, Vermithor. Roar! In the confrontation, two more dragon roars echoed across the landscape. One originated from the cliffs, where Rhaenyra rode Syrax. The other emanated from the mountain range, where a massive brown dragon emerged from a cavern, casting a wary gaze upon the four dragons. However, it made no move to approach, opting to perch on a distant reef, observing with a cautious eye. Glancing at the newcomer, Rhaegar recognized the dragon, a wild dragon known as sheepstealer. This mature mud dragon, about the same age as Caraxes, had gained a reputation for stealing sheep from the island's herders. It seems that sheepstealer was startled by the loud roars of the dragons and came out to assess the situation from a safe distance. Apparently, there is no reason to worry. Simultaneously, Syrax flew to the side of Cannibal. Rhaenyra, almost shoulder to shoulder with Rhaegar, looked annoyed. "Rhaegar, what are you doing? Are you obsessed with fighting dragons?" Rhaegar's tone was firm. "The Cannibal is the strongest of the wild dragons. It has its own pride. Where it falls, it must rise again." "That doesn't make it any easier to control a dragon," Rhaenyra retorted, her gaze darting nervously between Vermithor and Silverwing. She couldn't comprehend Rhaegar's risky behavior, but she couldn't simply stand by and watch either. She felt compelled to intervene and assist him. Rhaegar analyzed the situation. "Silverwing is still recovering. I just need to defeat Vermithor. Syrax has never been in combat before, so my assistance will be limited," Rhaenyra lamented, her fingers tightening with tension. Since becoming a dragon rider, she hadn't yet had the chance to experience a battle. Despite her initial intention to teach Rhaegar a lesson, she found herself secretly craving the adrenaline rush of a fierce clash. Rhaegar's heart raced with anticipation as he flashed a confident smile. "You can watch. With the Cannibal by my side, I'm more than capable." In the middle of their conversation, Vermithor and Silverwing closed in, unleashing jets of dragon flame. "Protect yourself, Rhaenyra!" Rhaegar's urgent shout cut through the tension as the Cannibal surged forward, spewing emerald dragon flames. Boom! The collision of the 3 dragon flames unleashed a devastating force, engulfing the sky in heat. Rhaegar lay on his back, gripping the cannibal's scales with exhilaration in his eyes. Despite the initial clash, the cannibal kept up its speed and was ready for another attack. The cannibal's second dragon flame shot towards the larger Vermithor, aiming for its neck. Vermithor, relying on its sturdy build, put up a good fight, using its wings to disperse the flames. Seizing the chance, the cannibal rushed towards the vulnerable Silverwing, who recoiled in pain. A mournful howl echoed as the cannibal's jaws closed around Silverwing's neck. But Rhaegar commanded, "Cannibal, watch out!" The cannibal reacted quickly to the command and changed direction, narrowly avoiding the golden dragon flames. Vermithor was really angry to see its mate wounded again, so it unleashed a torrent of golden flames in pursuit of the cannibal. However, the cannibal was faster and managed to dodge the onslaught, disappearing into the clouds. Below, Silverwing crashed heavily to the ground, its neck gushing blood as it writhed in agony. The sheepstealer, watching from afar, cheered in anticipation, eager for a feast. "Stop!" But its excitement was short-lived as Rhaenyra, commanding Syrax, intervened, positioning herself between them with a stern rebuke in High Valyrian. She was enraged by the actions of Vermithor and Silverwing, which involved an attack on Cannibal and threatening Rhaegar's safety. But Rhaenyra understood the delicate balance of power within House Targaryen. Vermithor and Silverwing had been loyal mounts to her ancestors, King Jaehaerys and Queen Alicent, serving the kingdom. As much as she despised their actions, she couldn't ignore the value of these adult dragons to the Targaryen house. In contrast, Sheepstealer, older and wilder, posed a significant threat. Comparable in size to the formidable Caraxes, Sheepstealer dwarfed Syrax, who was still maturing. With her nerves on edge, Rhaenyra led Syrax into a tense standoff with the Sheepstealer. Sheepstealer roared menacingly, but refrained from launching an attack. Syrax, sensing her rider's tension, echoed her aggression with a low growl, wings poised for defense. Despite its smaller stature, Syrax possessed a spirit that matched larger dragons. In response, Sheepstealer, intimidated by Syrax's display, retreated without a fight. The aerial skirmish continues. Cannibal disappeared into the thick clouds, out of Vermithor's sight. Driven by fury, Vermithor pursues, his vision obscured by the billowing mist. In that moment of reduced visibility, a massive form hurtles from the flank, descending upon Vermithor with lethal precision. Cannibal emerges, its jaws clamping down on Vermithor's neck, and blood spurting forth in a gory display. Roar! The attack took Vermithor by surprise, leaving him no time to prepare a defense. He struggled desperately to escape. But Cannibal, driven by its instincts, presses its advantage, sinking its fangs deep into Vermithor's flesh, ripping skin and muscle with savage ferocity. Vermithor roared in agony, his wings flailing and claws slashing at Cannibal's body. "Cannibal, disengage!" Rhaegar commanded. For a moment, Cannibal was overcome by the intoxicating scent of blood. But reason wins out, and it obeyed its master's orders. Releasing its grip, it tears a chunk of flesh before retracting, gulping down the spoils. Swiftly evading Vermithor's potential counterattack, it plants its hind limbs on its foe's abdomen, propelling itself into the air with a forceful leap. As Cannibal retreats, leaving behind a wounded and enraged Vermithor, the bronze dragon let out a roar of rage, blood cascading from its neck, barely able to maintain flight. With a half-hearted roar, Cannibal vanished into the clouds, its trail obscured from view. But just when it was out of reach, it emerged from below, launching another attack. As Vermithor, badly hurt and unable to dodge, felt the burning pain of Cannibal's bite on his wing's shoulder blade, the sickening sound of bone breaking filled the air. In a blind rage, Vermithor ignored the pain in his neck as he lashed out with a desperate attempt to bite Cannibal's flesh with his powerful jaws. "Dracarys!" Rhaegar's voice cut through the chaos, and he tightened his grip on the reins as he gave the command again. Cannibal released its grip and unleashed a torrent of dragon flame directly into Vermithor's gaping maw, responding instinctively to its master's voice. There was a loud boom. The dragon flame hit Vermithor's head with a bang, filling the air with thick, swirling smoke. For a brief moment, Vermithor was left dazed and disoriented, his neck sagging limply as his wounds seeped dragon blood. But even though he took a devastating blow, Vermithor's strong defenses held up. He tried to regain his senses and take control of his battered body. Chapter 96, Dance of Triumph. Roar! Vermithor let out a roar that could be heard all the way up in the sky. It was a mix of anger and desperation as he tried to get revenge. His massive tail swung with great force, striking Cannibal's abdomen and sending the dragon reeling. Cannibal, pushed by the blow, quickly got out of the way. But Vermithor was really angry. He shot a bunch of golden flames. "Cannibal, down!" Rhaegar's voice commanded Cannibal to dive low to evade the flames. Cannibal plummeted earthward, avoiding the attack. Seizing the opportunity, Vermithor, despite his injuries, attempted to give chase. However, the pain from his broken shoulder blade and weakened wings made it difficult for him to keep up, and he started to lose altitude. "Dracarys!" Before Vermithor could regain his balance, Rhaegar's command echoed. With agility, Cannibal circled around the wounded Vermithor, unleashing dragon flames. Despite his resilience and formidable physique, Vermithor found himself overwhelmed by Cannibal's relentless assault. As Rhaegar observed the futile struggles of the bronze dragon, a revelation dawned upon him. He often wondered why he lost the last fight. Besides the fact that he fought Silverwing and Vermithor together, he realized that the key to victory lay not only in skillful combat but also in exploiting the vulnerabilities of his opponents. And today, it was Vermithor's swift and grievous injury that spelled his downfall, not Cannibal's. In particular, after the fight with the Shadow Wyrm, Rhaegar had a realization about the essence of combat strategy. Unless faced with an overwhelmingly difference, relying solely on sheer size would prove futile in avoiding harm or even death. Dragons are naturally violent and fierce. Once they've used up their fire, they use their claws and fangs in close combat weapons that are very lethal. If it hadn't been for Cannibal's quick thinking and Silverwing getting in the way, Rhaegar's situation might have been much worse. His opponent could have easily killed him by ripping his stomach open and then finishing him off. With this in mind, Rhaegar decided to use Cannibal's speed and its fire as an advantage. He came up with a plan to attack first and surprise his opponent. Cannibal's unbeatable speed made it the perfect choice for the front line. It just needed to deliver a crushing blow, leaving its opponent vulnerable to the next attack. Roar! The Cannibal's roars echoed through the sky as it unleashed fire on Vermithor, making the bronze dragon's wounds worse and making it lose composure. Down below, amidst the dragon roars and explosive bursts, the sheepstealer on the ground started to get restless. Casting covetous glances at the Silverwing lying in a pool of blood, the scent of it whetted its appetite. Roar! Once more, the sheepstealer spread its wings and soared into the air, its casting a shadow over Syrax. Its aim was to intimidate the latter into retreat. Rhaenyra looked up at the brown dragon and her eyes flashed. She gave a firm command, "Dracarys!" Roar! Syrax waited until the right moment and then shot up, blasting a flames at dragon's face. The sheepstealer was caught off guard and awkwardly bobbed its head to avoid the fire, its demeanor transforming into one of aggression. The sheepstealer was one of the few untamed dragons that lived on Dragonstone. It had gained a bad reputation among the locals, even worse than the cannibal. Despite its menacing countenance, the cannibal had always maintained a reclusive distance from human settlements, sporadically appearing only in the vicinity of Dragonmont and refraining from causing harm to humans. The sheepstealer was the opposite. It had an insatiable appetite for the herder's sheep and loved the thrill of the hunt. Any attempts to stop it from preying were met with dragon flame attacks, which often resulted in serious injuries or even fatalities. The sheepstealer was enraged by the sight of the dragon before it. The sheepstealer let out a loud roar, spewing an orange-colored dragon flame from its mouth. The dragon flame was pretty distinctive, kind of like mud dots that spread out over a wide area. "Move out of the way, Syrax!" Rhaenyra reacted quickly to the threat and moved Syrax out of the way, then fired a burst of dragon flame back at the enemy. Roar! In its first battle, the young Syrax seemed to exude a sense of grandeur, roaring loudly as it unleashed a golden dragon flame, which merged with the sheepstealer's attack and overpowered it. Frustrated by its inability to overcome the dragon flame attack, the sheepstealer's fury intensified as it beat its wings vigorously in an attempt to overwhelm Syrax with its size advantage. However, Syrax, despite being smaller, compensated with remarkable agility, swiftly closing the distance and darting around its adversary with the grace of a seabird. After a few failed attempts to catch its prey, the sheepstealer redirected its aggression towards the badly injured Silverwing. Its predatory instincts were focused on the vulnerable adult dragon, ready to deliver a fatal blow. Roar! Silverwing let out a terrified roar, its neck injury making it unable to move and defend itself properly. But the sheepstealer wasn't going to let that stop it. It descended on its target, ready to bite. Dracarys! Rhaenyra saw Silverwing was in trouble. She wanted to stop the sheepstealer, urging Syrax to intervene and halt the sheepstealer's onslaught. In that moment, Rhaenyra felt a strong sense of worry. With Rhaegar engaged in a fierce aerial duel against Vermithor above, she could only hope for the best for his safety, her heart heavy with concern. Amidst her anxious thoughts, a deafening roar echoed from above. A huge bronze dragon came down from the sky, accompanied by green flames. Vermithor bore the scars of battle, with blood coming out of wounds on his neck, tail, and wings. With a determined look on his face, Rhaegar steered Cannibal into a steep dive, unleashing a torrent of flames upon Vermithor, pushing him downwards and preventing any chance of retreat. As they reached mid-air, Rhaegar told Cannibal to stop the attack. Cannibal slowed its descent with controlled wing beats. Vermithor, an expert at aerial combat, used his wings to slow his fall. He fell into the sea with a splash, sending waves out in all directions. The dragon's crimson blood mixed with the blue ocean, turning the water a dark red. The sea churned and boiled under the heat. A symphony of bubbles echoed through the waters. Roar! After a brief struggle, Vermithor's majestic head broke through the surface of the sea, gasping for air. The waves were pretty wild, and Vermithor was having trouble flapping his wings. He was trying to get to the shore, but his body was hurt, so it was slow going. Despite all the injuries he had, none of them were fatal. He managed to claw his way back to the beach, where he collapsed and panted, lost in thought. Rhaegar looked on from above, feeling a mix of relief and contemplation. Dragons were to be respected, not killed in battle. He gave Cannibal a pat on the back, his voice full of triumph. "Cannibal, we did it!" Roar! Cannibal lifted his head proudly, his emerald eyes gleaming with arrogance as he paced back and forth, his sinuous form tracing patterns of victory in the sky with his verdant dragon flame. At that moment, he was the undisputed ruler of Dragonstone Island. He had defeated Vermithor and Silverwing, and he was now in control of the island. "Dragonstone Island, your prince has returned." Rhaegar's proclamation echoed across the winds, celebrating Cannibal's triumph and the success of their strategy. But as the celebrations got underway, Rhaegar's gaze shifted towards Rhaenyra, his expression showing a hint of concern. "Cannibal, let's help," he said, his voice showing a hint of urgency. Chapter 97, Lament of the Sheepstealer. Dracarys. Rhaenyra commanded as she urged Syrax into battle against the sheepstealer. Engaged in pursuit, the sheepstealer's hunger drove it to persist despite repeated skirmishes. Rhaenyra was totally focused, paying close attention to the rhythm of the battle as she guided Syrax. The clash of dragons was intense, with both of them trying to gain the upper hand. Their dragon flames intertwined in a deadly dance. But just as victory seemed within reach, the sheepstealer deceptively retreated, luring Syrax towards the vulnerable Silverwing below. Rhaenyra reacted quickly, trying to foil the ambush with a barrage of dragon flame, but the sheepstealer had anticipated her move. Suddenly, the tables turned as the sheepstealer unleashed a torrent of dragon flame, engulfing both dragon and rider in fire. "Syrax, evade!" With horror etched across her features, Rhaenyra urged Syrax to turn, but it was too late. The flames descended upon them, forcing Syrax to contort in a desperate attempt to shield Rhaenyra from the brunt of the assault. Roar! In the blink of an eye, Syrax's chest and abdomen bore the brunt of the dragon flame, eliciting a cry of pain. Syrax was new to battle and struggled to maintain balance amidst the pain. Her body lurching downward as she flapped her wings. Vulnerable, she was easy prey for the sheepstealer, whose eyes gleamed with hunger as he lunged for the kill. Rhaenyra, tethered by a chain around her waist, clung to the saddle, her body weightless as she braced for the attack with dread. With the sheepstealer closing in, she could only watch helplessly as the ferocious beast descended upon Syrax, rending flesh with merciless ferocity. In the middle of the attack, a resounding dragon's roar was heard, heralding the arrival of a black dragon from above. The wind whipped by its wings and struck Rhaenyra, temporarily blinding her as she watched her brother's mount descend with a roar, its claws poised to strike. Roar! The sheepstealer's agonized shriek echoed through the sky as Rhaegar's dragon delivered a devastating blow. "Cannibal, it's Rhaegar!" Blood trickled down Rhaenyra's cheek as she beheld the figure in the black dragon's back. "Drag it away!" Rhaegar's command was followed by the chilling sound of flesh yielding to claws. With a vice-like grip, Cannibal's dragon claws clamped onto the sheepstealer's ribs, exerting crushing pressure as it mercilessly snapped the dragon's muzzle. With a quick flap of its wings, Cannibal lifted its struggling prey into the air. The sheepstealer was in agony, screaming in pain as it beat its wings in a desperate attempt to escape. Meanwhile, Syrax, who had been caught in the sheepstealer's grasp, quickly righted himself, avoiding a fall. Cannibal, enjoying its hunt, played with its prey, easily keeping its grip despite the sheepstealer's frantic struggles. Rhaegar kept his gaze fixed on Rhaenyra, feeling a rush of relief as he watched Syrinx regain control. He wasn't aware of what had led to Rhaenyra's confrontation with the sheepstealer, but he was just worried about her safety. Rhaegar was grateful for his timely arrival and his expression hardened as he directed his fury at the sheepstealer. "Cannibal! Throw it into the sea!" he said firmly. "Roar!" With a roar, Cannibal did as he was told, lowering himself towards the ocean's surface with his captive in tow. With a final release of its claws, the sheepstealer tried to escape, but was met with green flames that engulfed its head in searing agony. With a muffled pop, the sheepstealer's cries were suddenly silenced by the fire. The second dragon of the day fell into the water. The sheepstealers fell, sending water into the air as it struggled to stay afloat in the rough waves. Cannibal kept a close eye on the situation, staying alert and ready to act as Rhaegar steered it. With each attempt by the sheepstealer to get out of the sea, Cannibal met it with dragon fire, preventing any chance of escape. Dragons, creatures of fire, just weren't built for the water. The sheepstealer's struggles were slowly sapped of strength as it gasped for air amidst the depths. As the drowning dragon's desperate pleas echoed, Rhaegar remained firm in his resolve. He gave Cannibal a gentle pat on the back and said, "Let's go, Cannibal. Roar." Cannibal grumbled a bit but did as he was told, turning away from the scene and flying off into the distance. Although it had wanted to drown the stubborn intruder to enjoy a future meal, Cannibal listened to its master. The sheepstealer writhed like a trapped serpent, clawing its way onto the shore with effort, its movements clearly showing fear. On the other side of the beach, Vermithor was absent. The tide had washed away any signs of him, leaving only the sand where he had been. Rhaegar realized this and made a beeline back to find Rhaenyra. "Rhaegar, I'm here!" Rhaenyra's shout echoed from the cliff above. Rhaegar looked down and saw Syrinx on the ground, with Rhaenyra standing nearby, her hair tousled and waving at him. Not far away, Silverwing, who was badly injured, had also disappeared without a trace. "Cannibal, land," Rhaegar instructed. As Cannibal descended, Rhaegar slid down from its wing and rushed to Rhaenyra's side. Their reunion was a whirlwind of emotions. He gave Rhaenyra a hug, his heart racing with concern. "Are you okay?" Rhaenyra shook her head, her face flushed with excitement. "I'm fine, thanks. Syrinx protected me." Relief washed over Rhaegar's features as he buried his head against her back. "You scared me to death. You went charging in, risking your life." Rhaenyra put an arm around him and gently stroked his head with her other hand. "I just wanted to help. But that brown dragon was after Silverwing." "Where's Silverwing now?" Rhaegar asked, his tone casual but with a hint of concern. Just as Vermithor climbed up from the cliff's base, he flew off with Silverwing, Rhaenyra recounted, her voice tinged with fear. "Next time you face a dragon, you need to stay far away," Rhaegar advised seriously. Rhaenyra's expression faltered, feeling embarrassed. "It was my first battle, and you're scolding me, you are the younger here." "No, my dragon is much bigger than yours," Rhaegar replied, sounding a bit annoyed. His confidence in engaging dragons came from two sources, his audacity and Cannibal's size and courage. After defeating Vermithor and Silverwing, Rhaegar felt like he was unbeatable. But he couldn't help but feel apprehensive about one dragon, Vaur. Syrinx was still a young dragon, less than 20 years old, while Cannibal was a formidable adversary. Rhaenyra had learned a valuable lesson from her brother, that actions speak louder than words, and defeat can be humbling. She crouched down to meet Rhaegar's gaze, pressing her cheek against his and whispering, "You're right, Rhaegar." Rhaegar gave her a warm hug, his cheek brushing hers as he murmured, "I missed you, sister. Where have you been since that night?" "Father and I were worried about you," Rhaenyra murmured, burying her head in the crook of Rhaegar's shoulder. At the mention of his experiences in the peninsula, Rhaegar's expression darkened. "I stumbled into a nest of savages. They were all insufferable, no intellect, nothing interesting to say." Chapter 98, The Queen's Guilt. The siblings shared stories of their adventures. Before long, a group of guards showed up. Rhaegar, Rhaenyra. Viseis, looking a bit worn out but happy to see them, brushed past the guards and hurried towards his children with surprising speed. "Father." Rhaegar's face lit up at the sight of his father, though he couldn't hug him with Rhaenyra still leaning on him. Rhaenyra was startled by her father's arrival and turned to face him, greeting him timidly, "Father." She had slipped out of her chamber through the secret passage behind the king's guard, and she felt a twinge of nervousness at being caught. "It's good to see you both safe," Viserys said, breathing a sigh of relief. He ignored his daughter's subdued greeting as he focused on his son. He crouched down next to Rhaegar, his eyes scanning him with a look of paternal concern. He had dreamed of Rhaegar's safe return, and now seeing him in the flesh, he felt a profound sense of relief. With an affectionate embrace, Viserys planted a kiss on Rhaegar's forehead. "When the dragon roared on the island, I knew it was you who had returned." Rhaegar wiped away the drool with a sheepish grin and bragged about his victories. "Cannibal and I defeated Vermithor and Silverwing. No dragon on the island could match us." "You're certainly bold, my boy," Viserys replied, his expression a mix of pride and concern. Since Rhaegar's recovery, he had grown in many ways, but his audacity seemed to grow with each passing day. From taming a dragon without permission to engaging in battles on their doorstep upon his return, Rhaegar's daring actions left Viserys wondering what the future might hold as his son matured. Viserys was filled with thoughts but showed only relief on his face. "You've never been an ordinary child, Rhaegar." In that moment, he recognized Rhaegar as the prince foretold in the Song of Ice and Fire prophecy. Indeed, Rhaegar had proven himself capable of taming the largest wild dragon ever seen and defeating the renowned Bronze Fury and Silverwing of the continent. "Come, I've prepared a grand feast to welcome you home." Viserys gave his eldest son a playful pat on the head before lifting him up. As they walked, Viserys turned to Rhaenyra with a hint of reproach in his voice. "You disobeyed me again, Rhaenyra." "I'm sorry, father," Rhaenyra apologized, bowing her head. "I was really worried about Rhaegar, so I couldn't just wait around." "It's not the first time you've disobeyed my orders," Viserys replied with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Let's set that aside for now. You both seem to be in good spirits." "Yes, father," Rhaenyra answered quietly, her gaze lingering on the father-son pair, a hint of longing evident in her eyes. Once they'd freshened up from their journey, the two siblings found themselves seated at the long table in the hall. Rhaegar told their father all about their adventures on the peninsula in great detail, his eyes shining with excitement as he told about his exploits. Viserys, holding a goblet in his hand, listened to his eldest son's stories patiently, his expression kind and attentive. However, when Rhaegar got to the part about the Shadowbringer's head being resurrected and the mask being used to defeat the curse, Viserys' face darkened slightly, and a hint of gravity clouded his features. Viserys saw magic and dragons as two dangerous forces. The idea of bringing the dead back to life and perpetuating curses made him feel ashamed and disgusted. "The House Brune and the Crab family," Viserys said aloud, his voice tinged with concern. "It looks like we need to send someone to look into this." His expression remained unchanged, but inwardly, Viserys was already calculating the depths of involvement of these two families. As Rhaegar kept talking, he noticed that his father and sister were getting more and more subdued. He felt a sense of unease creep over him. He thought his stories were pretty engaging. Why were they so passive? After a moment of reflection, he decided to share the news of the Peninsula nobles' allegiance and the 2,000 free men who had pledged their support and followed him across the sea. Viserys' face changed as he processed this new information. Meanwhile, Rhaenyra pursed her lips and took a sip from her glass, her expression unreadable. Rhaegar stopped his story when he sensed something was wrong. "Sorry I'm late, but I hope you're all ready." Alicent's voice broke the silence just in time. The three turned to see Alicent coming down the stairs, cradling the baby in one arm and leading Helaena with the other, while Aegon trailed behind, accompanied by a maid. Viserys paused for a moment, then turned to Rhaegar and said, "There are more than a few free folk following you. I'll have them transported to the area near the woods first, just to make sure they have what they need. Once you figure out how to use them, you can deploy them as needed." "Understood, father," Rhaegar acknowledged. While the father and son conversed, Alicent made her way to the table and took her seat, her eyes filled with joy and emotion as she addressed Rhaegar. "The seven gods have blessed you with a safe return, Rhaegar. Brother." Helena's voice rang out with joy as she stood up to greet her long-absent sibling. Rhaegar gave a small smile in response to Helena's greeting, then turned to Alicent and said, "Thanks to Cannibal's protection, I made it back safely." "The wild dragon?" Alicent's puzzled expression matched her crossed arms. "Once I tamed him, he stopped being wild," Rhaegar clarified. Alicent said, "You showed great courage in taming an adult dragon all by yourself. On the other hand," she added, glancing at Aegon, "Aegon is still struggling to command Sunfire and has yet to succeed." Mom. Aegon objected, his eyebrows furrowing. As Rhaegar observed Alicent's hands, he noticed their roughness, which showed she'd been used to practical tasks like sewing and writing. Her fingers showed signs of recent injuries, with the wounds still fresh and unhealed. Rhaegar, who was well versed in scholarly matters, recognized these wounds as recent, likely inflicted in the past few days. Rhaegar paused before speaking, "Your Majesty, what happened to your hand?" "Hey!" Alicent seemed taken aback, looking at Rhaegar's gaze and quickly covering her hand with a slight panic. Alicent offered a smile and said, "My apologies, perhaps it's just the humidity of Dragonstone Island making my hands itch." "Make sure to keep warm," Rhaegar added casually, though his tone was peculiar. While Dragonstone Island was indeed humid, King's Landing, being a seaside city, wasn't significantly drier. Alicent's excuse didn't seem very convincing, and her nervousness only made Rhaegar more suspicious. Alicent quickly changed the subject, asking a servant, "Is the banquet ready? Please bring it forward at once." Viseis agreed. Rhaegar leaned in close to Rhaenyra and asked quietly, "Why is Alicent nervously tapping her fingers?" As Rhaenyra was Alicent's former confidant, she was aware of such details and whispered back, "It's a nervous habit of Alicent's. Whenever she's anxious, she tends to tap her fingers, often to the point of bleeding." "Nervous?" Rhaegar echoed silently. Why would someone be nervous? Fear, excitement? Or maybe it's a sign of guilty. Chapter 99, Finding the Real Culprit. Why was she afraid or guilty? Rhaegar was thinking fast as he considered Alicent's nervous behavior. Could it be that she was worried about him? Rhaegar doubted it. Knowing Alicent as he did, she would have preferred he never came back. Aegon would have one less brother to compete with, making his path to the airship clearer. As plates of fine food were set on the table and the feast commenced, Rhaegar mechanically picked his favorite food, finding them tasteless. Noticing his distraction, Rhaenyra nudged him with her elbow and asked, "What's on your mind?" Furrowing his brow, Rhaegar abruptly rose from his seat, calling out, "Father!" Viserys looked up, puzzled. "What is it, Rhaegar?" Rhaegar's expression grew serious as he asked, "Father, why does a man's heart becomes anxious?" Viserys looked up and put down his utensils. "A criminal may be anxious when he's trying to avoid getting caught and even more anxious when he's on trial." "Understood," Rhaegar nodded, his tone shifting. "The night I left, I was attacked by 2 dragons because someone fed Cannibal a dragon egg laid by Silverwing." "So, who did this, or rather, who ordered it?" he demanded. The joy of family reunion couldn't overshadow Rhaegar's determination to get to the bottom of things. He was aware of the dangers lurking in the shadows, and this time, upon his return, he was determined to expose the mastermind behind the scenes and hold them accountable. As Rhaegar spoke, the room fell silent. Rhaenyra watched her brother with a mix of amazement and concern. She'd been wondering why the 2 dragons had targeted Cannibal, but her concerns for Rhaegar's safety had made her focus on that instead of thinking more deeply about it. Now, with Rhaegar bringing it to light, she realized someone was plotting against him. Viserys' expression darkened as he spoke, his voice gruff. "Since your disappearance, I've been investigating. The guards involved in feeding the dragon eggs were found dead on the beach." He paused, his gaze firm. "Rest assured, justice will be served." Rhaegar's tone was somber as he continued, "Before I tamed Cannibal, I was lured into Dragonmont. Who was behind it?" Viserys' expression twisted with guilt. "The guards were in the dark, and the Dragon Keeper was moved to a different post before I could get to the bottom of it." Then Rhaegar dropped another bombshell. "As I was leaving Vermithor and Silverwing behind, I was attacked by a 3rd dragon with scarlet flames." Viserys shot up from his seat, his fists slamming onto the tabletop. "You're sure it was scarlet flames?" His voice was tight and urgent, each word carrying a sense of urgency. "I'm certain," Rhaegar said with a firm nod. Viserys' eyes were ablaze with fury, his teeth clenched in rage. "Daemon! You despicable creature!" They both had a realization. There were only 2 dragons with red flames, Caraxes and Meleys. Meleys was owned by Rhaenys Targaryen, his cousin. She was known as the Queen who never was and fought for the right to inherit the Iron Throne. Despite their differences, Viserys had faith in her character. Honor was everything to Rhaenys, and she wouldn't risk the line of succession. On the other hand, his brother, Daemon, recently expelled from King's Landing, simmered with anger and resentment. With knowledge of Dragonstone's secrets, including the Dragon Keeper's dealings and secret passages, suspicion fell squarely on him. It must be him, Viseis erupted, his fury palpable. Because I refused to promise Rhaenyra to him, he's gone and put my child in harm's way. Viseis' anger shook him, and Alicent rushed to his side, urging him to calm down. But Viseis was relentless. Summon the maester to send a raven to King's Landing and issue a warrant for Daemon's arrest, dead or alive. Harold, guarding the doorway, offered a suggestion. Your Grace, Daemon has a powerful dragon. Instead of alarming him with a notice, we should alert the Vale first. He may be hiding in Runestone. Excellent. Send messages to the Vale and every maester. Anyone who captures Daemon will be rewarded in gold equal to their weight. As Viseis fumed, Rhaegar interjected, Father, please calm down and take care of yourself. Viseis looked at him and said in a resolute voice, Father will definitely get justice for you. Rhaegar looked at Alicent, sensing his father's fragile state. His suspicions remained just that, suspicions. I trust you, Father, Rhaegar said, trying to reassure him, though the atmosphere remained tense. Viseis, enraged, abruptly left the table, with Alicent following to tend to him. The once festive family gathering dissolved into somber silence. As his parents disappeared around the corner of the stairs, Aegon got up and left without saying anything. He didn't want to share a meal with his half-siblings, especially his brother, who he found particularly difficult to get along with. Meanwhile, Helaena sat bewildered, uncertain of what had sparked her father and brother Rhaegar's sudden anger. Despite her confusion, she was hungry, so she reluctantly nibbled on the cake in front of her. She kept her eyes on Rhaegar and Rhaenyra, noting the tension in their expressions, and tried to blend in. Meanwhile, Aemond was still asleep in his nanny's arms, unaware of the tension in the air. Rhaenyra was the first to speak up, gripping Rhaegar's wrist and asking him solemnly, You disappeared because of an attack by Daemon. It's likely, Rhaegar confirmed quietly. Releasing his hand, Rhaenyra's fists clenched, her expression hardening. That wretch, does he have no honor when it comes to the throne? Don't worry, he will face the consequences, Rhaegar assured her softly. He tried to kill his own nephew, Rhaenyra said angrily, repeating her brother's frustration. Her feelings towards Daemon had changed a lot since the last abduction. The man she once saw as a caring uncle had now lost her respect. Now, there was only one word to describe him, madman. As night fell, the castle was filled with a heavy silence. Viseis went to his room to try to forget his troubles with a few drinks until he passed out. Meanwhile, the rest of the household went to bed, trying to get some rest after a busy day. Alicent, unable to change her husband's mind or calm her wild children, went to her room to get some rest. However, she couldn't sleep, tossing and turning on the soft bed. She was thinking about what happened that day, especially Rhaegar's conversation about guilt. Despite her insistence that Daemon was the culprit and she was innocent, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. How could she find peace of mind when she was plagued by such unsettling thoughts? Chapter 100, Warning. Alicent's head was throbbing with pain, and she let out a silent sigh as she closed her eyes, seeking solace in sleep. Time passed, and she found herself in a state of drowsy, half-consciousness. Knock, knock, knock. All of a sudden, the peace and quiet of her room was shattered by a loud noise. Alicent's headache was so intense that she ignored the noise as just a minor distraction. Before long, the noise stopped, and she started to drift back into a deep sleep. But as she was about to fall asleep, she felt a sudden rush of warmth. It felt like she was sitting too close to a roaring fireplace, causing beads of sweat to form on her forehead. It's really hot in here, I'm thirsty. Alicent's parched mouth was yearning for relief, and in her stupor, she reached out for the glass of water on her bedside table. However, her reaching hand encountered something unexpected, a layer of fabric. As she gently touched the fabric, she felt soft flesh beneath it. Fabric. Soft flesh. Alicent's foggy consciousness suddenly came back to her, and she reluctantly opened her eyes to the dimly lit room. There she saw a figure in a black robe sitting on the edge of her bed. In the figure's hand was a coal brazier, its glow casting eerie shadows across the room. Who are you? Alicent's heart was racing with fear, and she instinctively recoiled, clutching the covers tightly around her body. It's me, Your Grace. A familiar voice came from the figure, who then took off his hood and offered her a cup of water. Here's your water. Alicent's eyes widened in disbelief as she strained to make out the visitor's face. Alicent looked at the boy standing by her bed in disbelief and said, It's you, Rhaegar. Are you scared, Your Grace. Rhaegar, wearing a black robe, looked at his stepmother calmly. Alicent's complexion suddenly changed, and she scolded, "Why are you in my room? You should be asleep at this hour." For a moment, she thought that another family member had snuck into her room, and the thought made her nervous. Rhaegar, holding the glass of water, tilted his head and said, "Are you not thirsty? Why don't you take a sip?" "No, I'm not thirsty anymore. Leave this instant, do you hear me?" Alicent's anger flared, and she rebuked him mercilessly. "Very well, if you're not thirsty," Rhaegar replied calmly, setting the glass aside. "But before I go, I would like to have a word with you. There's nothing to discuss. How did you manage to enter my room? Where is the guard at the door?" Alicent was adamant about expelling her stepson from her quarters. Rhaegar chuckled softly and pointed to a wall in the room. "Isn't there a secret passage in your chamber? A bit of exploration would reveal that." After the family banquet, he had sought out Cole to inquire about recent events on Dragonstone Island. Through their conversation, he had learned of the existence of several secret passages within the castle, one of which led directly to the Queen's chamber. When he looked at them, it confirmed some of his suspicions. So he had come tonight. Alicent followed Rhaegar's lead and looked into the sealed secret passage. She subconsciously grabbed the sheet, her eyes flickering with panic as she asked uneasily, "What do you mean? What are you trying to tell me?" Rhaegar watched her carefully, sensing her reluctance. He started to tell a story. "I couldn't help but wonder why there were always unexpected problems when I tried to tame my dragon. Daemon bribed the dragon keeper to send a false message, which led me astray towards Dragonmont," she continued. "Before that, someone had sent me similar information, but pointing towards the east coast." Alicent's expression shifted slightly as she replied, "I was the one who shared that information with Rhaenyra. It turns out that the two young dragons were indeed on the east coast, and Sunfire was found pretty early on. I didn't lie. As you said, the intel from the east coast was spot on," Rhaegar acknowledged. "Then the grey ghost showed up on Dragonmont. The dragon that should have been there wasn't Cannibal, but Silverwing, in a sensitive period after laying her eggs. Given that, is it possible that someone knew I didn't trust them and intentionally gave me irrelevant information to guide me to Dragonmont?" Rhaegar's voice softened, and Alicent felt her nerves start to tingle in the dimly lit room. Alicent's face grew cold at his words, and she replied in a chilly tone, "This is all in your imagination. It was Daemon who set you up. I was just trying to improve relations with Rhaenyra. We're like sisters." "Fair enough, your explanation makes sense," Rhaegar nodded, not discounting her words. "He wasn't there to accuse her tonight. There wasn't any concrete evidence against the Queen. It was all just suspicion." Rhaegar bowed his head and placed the portable coal stove on the bed, gently opening the lid. The red-hot coals were exposed to the air, dispersing the darkness with their bright flames. In the glow, Rhaegar's features, previously shrouded in shadow, were half illuminated. "What are you doing?" Alicent's nerves jangled at the sight, her mind racing with memories. "Nothing much. Since you don't want water, let's get warm," Rhaegar replied, reaching out to cup a piece of ember in his hand. He held it calmly and raised his hand between them. The coals glowed, casting light between them. Rhaegar kept his eyes neutral as he spoke calmly, "Your Grace, I'm sure you're aware that my recent journey to the peninsula wasn't exactly peaceful. Many people who disrespected me met their end by dragonfire." Alicent quietly moved to the other side of the bed, her face showing fear. Without advancing, Rhaegar continued, "I don't know if you were involved, but I'd really appreciate it if you could set aside any prejudices you may hold against me, whether by ignoring them or adopting a more neutral stance. I just ask that you don't cause any trouble for me, my father, or my sister." With that, Rhaegar looked his stepmother in the eye. Click! His fists clenched, and he crushed the charcoal, causing it to spill onto the white bedspread. The broken coals ignited the fabric instantly. Alicent let out a scream of panic and quickly used a pillow to smother the embers. Rhaegar grabbed the cup of water nearby and started dousing the flames methodically, extinguishing them one by one. As the smoke cleared, Rhaegar's face was still obscured, and his voice was barely above a whisper. "I hope you can retain some compassion, Your Grace. What in the world are you doing? I've done nothing wrong, how many times do I have to say it?" Alicent's irritation flared as she verged on breaking down, her voice filled with anger. Rhaegar averted his gaze and interjected, "I believe you, for you are my stepmother, and I trust you to safeguard the children of your name, including myself and Rhaenyra. I am the queen, your father's wife, and with that title comes a certain responsibility, Alicent replied, her expression hardening. She continued in a harsh tone, but you shouldn't treat your own mother with such disrespect. Trespassing into my room and threatening me with fire. I will tell your father about this and let him decide how to discipline a child who dishonors his name. As you wish, your grace, Rhaegar responded nonchalantly, replacing the lid of the coal stove and lifting it once more, ready to depart. However, just steps away, he paused as if remembering something, and turned back to say cryptically, by the way, Aegon is my brother, and I value that kinship. It was through my own abilities that I managed to evade the murder. But he is still young. Enough of this. Alicent snapped, her neck straining, eyes reddened, and teeth gritted. I will watch over my son, no matter what. Very well, mother, Rhaegar replied with a sweet smile, bowing like an innocent child. He exited the bedroom slowly, carrying the coal stove, and disappeared through the entrance of the secret passageway under his stepmother's hateful glare. Word count, 1380.
Thanks for listening.